It's not. You survived Thanksgiving last week?
I did. I was in West Virginia.
Whose water? Oh, this is mine.
Mama. You gotta see that.
I felt so bad.
Just turn it.
She's the one that today wants to do it. No.
She put on this as a no balls.
Yeah, oh man. How old is she?
She's jamming out to it.
2 or 3 weeks ago.
She's gonna be a dancer. Wow. You didn't even see it. Perfect timing. November to do. That's so cool.
Moved you to the front.
Yeah, I heard. That is beautiful. My mother took me to dance when I was little.
Look at this. Yeah, how can you do that?
Yeah. My mother took me to dance. I was wondering why I thought you ran out. Yeah, I was never even, for some reason. Hey, Gary. How are you? How are you? Yeah, that is beautiful. You're next to the teacher. Yes. You got a good swap for marketing.
Yeah, she was.
After last meeting, I was like, oh, I feel so bad for you. And I'm like, oh, this is beautiful. That was a good.
I don't know if it is
That's her.
fun to cut,
Too.
but I
Doing good.
watched.
And this is her brother. They live in West Virginia. He plays the violin in an orchestra.
Smart little kid.
Well, yeah.
Is it 9 o'clock yet?
It is 9:01. Oh, you gotta do an info.
Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order. Our chairman, Mr. Norris, is out today, so I'm going to be presiding over the meeting. And if I get off track or something, somebody please say that's not how we're supposed to do this, because it's been a while. So, a quorum call.
Pledge allegiance.
I'm sorry, Pledge Allegiance. Will y'all join me in the Pledge Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Quorum call. I think everybody's here except Tim Norris.
Norris, right.
So everybody's present except Tim Norris. Okay, public comment on agenda items. Does anybody have any public input on any items that are on the agenda? Ms. Letcher, please come forward.
Hi, I'm Betty Letcher. I live at Inlet Beach, and I will, when it comes up, have a comment and talk to y'all about the regional beach access at Inlet Beach that one family that are rent their home are asking for. So I will talk about that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anybody, anyone else? Anyone else? Okay. Now we need approval of the minutes, and I had one addition to the minutes. I left the meeting at some point last time, and probably need to say that Commissioner Cindy Meadows exited the meeting, and I think probably between 8 and 9. I think if you put that in there. Does anybody else have any revisions or comments on the minutes?
I move to accept the minutes.
There's a motion. Is
Second.
there a second motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Like sign. Motion carries. Okay, financial report.
Good morning, council members. In your packet for the financial report, the first 6 pages of the financial report are the budget in brief and the expenditures. These reflect through September the 30th. They still show as unofficial. Finance has got the audit going underway, and they've still got September open since they're not at a point where they can close it and roll everything forward. We do not know of any further items that should hit the TDC fund, so although these are unofficial, they are not expected to change. Following the expenditure information is the revenue and reserve report. The final fiscal year 15 bed tax collections were $19.484 million, just over that. It was that's net of the 3% commission on collections. This is just over $2.8 million over the anticipated revenues for the year. Visitor center sales were $15,871 in fiscal year 15. And you'll notice the TDC reserves ended the year at $52,973,498. The breakdown of these reserves is included in your packet. And also I'd like to go ahead and note that the roll forwards for encumbrances and projects, that's been completed. So if you have any questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
sir.
And this is Melissa Thomas.
Right.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We know who you are.
We know who you are.
Melissa, on going back to the budget, would you refresh our memories about the item on page 3, the second item, regarding the negative due to final settlement with Lord & Sons?
That was the one where there was a negotiated settlement on the contract. The purchase order was canceled, and there was a settlement reached with them on a final payment. It was not budgeted, and the board had approved the settlement, so that had hit.
And but remind me, what did they do, or what were they supposed to do?
It was the renovation for the TDC building.
Oh, this building. Okay, the building.
Yes, sir.
I got it. Okay. All right. And regarding the reserve fund, where is that reserve fund being kept at present? Who's managing it, in other words?
It is split up. I can send you a copy of the investment report. It all goes in together with all of the board's long-term investments. It's mostly with Wells Fargo. There's some with the Regions Trust, a little bit with Florida Government Investment Pool Fliggett, a little bit in SBA. But if you'd like, I can email out a copy of the investment report that shows.
I would like to see that. But
Yes, sir.
how are those investment decisions made? Who makes? Is it a decision you make, or a committee makes, or how is it done?
There is an investment committee. It's comprised of William Pennington, the clerk's finance director. He's Alex Alford's designee, myself, and then there is a member there's a member of the public on the clerk's side, and we are looking for a member on the board side. We do need one to be appointed on the board side for that committee. We meet quarterly and make recommendations. As the clerk is the custodian of the funds, they take those recommendations and they direct the investments.
So are you saying that in addition to the TDC money, there's other county money that's also pooled?
It's been pooled cash, yes, sir.
Okay. And is there any indication of what the return on that investment is?
Yes, sir, it varies. It's a smaller return, as the main focus is the retention of the principal.
Right.
We really do not go very far
Right.
out on the yield curve. It's mostly in bonds.
Okay.
I believe the last investment report was showing about a 1.7% return. With the market the way it is right now, it is up and down, but I think it was 1.7. I'll send that to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Melissa.
Melissa, will you send a copy of that to all the board members?
Well, yes, ma'am, I will.
Yeah, that would be good. And on that investment thing, there's government is limited on what we can invest in, and so there's some low returns in there. There's some bonds. There's some CDs. There's some mixed funds and things like that. But we're really limited. We can't take a lot of risk. We can't invest in
That's good.
a lot of stocks.
I didn't want to hear junk bonds in this.
No, sir, and there is an investment policy that directs those, and it is audited every year.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
so it's pretty tight. Okay, do we need a motion to accept the financial report?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to accept the financial report. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, motion carries. Okay, new business. Request recommendation to the VCC to approve and authorize the chairman to sign the updated TDC plan.
Yes, ma'am, this is an item that has to be done every 2 years. It contains an estimate of the estimated tax collection under the current levy. In looking at the way this is typically prepared, historically it looks like conservative estimates have been used. So in keeping with that methodology, we used $40 million for approximate collections. If you look down at the allocation of that, as far as each of the different projects or uses, there is a range at 10% under or 10% over. So when you total up the range, it would come up to $36 million to $44 million in anticipated collections. So we have just included those figures in the verbiage of the ordinance.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about that? Can that be changed, Melissa? Let's say that it says 7.9 to 9.6. What if it's like 9.8? Can it be changed, or
It
no?
would just affect all the others because it does have to total up to what the pennies would be.
Okay.
the right
So it all has
allocation.
to go out according to the pennies. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. I need a motion to accept. To accept that. Well, to approve and authorize the chairman, Mr. Norris, to sign the TDC plan. Need a motion? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Brillmeyer? And do I have a second? Okay, do I have a
Second.
second? A second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, motion carries. Okay, next item, request TDC approval of staff's recommendations for the committee members for the different committees, events, activities, arts, and culture advisory committee. And we can take these, Pamela, yeah, there you are. Pamela is going to make that presentation.
Good morning. Pamela Watkins, Director of Sales for the record. As you know, we have 4 committees, and I am the liaison for the South Walton Events Committee. And in your packets, you have the recommendations for those new members, and there are some existing members. If you have reviewed that and you are in agreement, if I can get an approval.
Okay, and is this for all the committees, or
No,
is
this
this
is
just
just
the
for
first
the
one?
South Walton Events Committee.
The events committee, okay. Does anybody have any comments on the list for the events committee?
Pamela, I have a question. There was a notice a week or so ago saying that anyone interested in committees should come to a meeting. I'm not sure when the date was. It's a week or two forward. What I'm getting at is, are these committees closed now? Can anyone?
Yes, they are closed. It closed November 5th, I believe.
Okay.
Don't know where you saw
Does anyone know
that.
what I'm referring to?
No. It could have been, was it a BCC? It could have been.
No, it was for the TDC.
It was for the TDC.
Yeah, because I forwarded it to somebody who was interested.
We advertised that in the newspaper
I don't remember.
and in the connection.
Okay, but it's closed as of November 5th?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, okay. Anybody have any comments or anything on this events committee? If not, I need a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, motion carries. That's your committee
Okay, thank you.
events.
Hello, John Irvin. Bit of an instant replay here with the marketing committee as well. 7 of the 9 submitted applications to continue. We did have a number of applications from the public during the advertised period, and with the way the chairs line up, we had the ability to fill 2 seats that the incumbents did not submit an application for. So there would be the 9 that we would propose to you for the marketing committee going forward for 2 years.
Okay. Anyone have any questions?
I think I need to recuse myself. I'm on the committee.
Okay.
There's no reason to recuse yourself on this. There's not a true voting conflict of interest under Chapter 112, so no recusal necessary.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody have any questions, comments about this committee? Okay, I need a motion.
I'll move, so moved.
Okay. And a second?
Second.
Second. Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Irvin. Okay, the Beach Management Committee, Mr. Kellenberg.
Good morning, Chairman, council members. Appreciate your time this morning. The Beach Management Committee, we had 3 people staying on, and then 5 of them were new. 1 person was transferring from the Destination Improvement Committee. So as you can see the names we have up there. I have 1 slot to be filled, and that'll be filled by a South Walton Turtle Watch person that I'm negotiating with or dealing with right now.
Okay, so we don't have a name, but that person has to be from the
South
Turtle
Walton
Watch?
Turtle Watch, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
On the committee here?
Clerk Tate.
No, sir, you're on the Destination Improvement Committee.
Oh, this is beach management.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, never mind.
Okay, anybody have any
No.
questions?
No.
Any questions, comments?
I keep getting confused.
Brian, are you going to bring back that other name
Yes,
for
ma'am.
that other? Okay, you'll bring that back, okay.
Yep.
Questions, comments? I need a motion.
Can we approve it without that name? Does that name come back later or for approval, or does it just get?
Yeah, he's going to bring it, he's going to bring that name back for approval.
Bring it
So we
back
could
to the next
approve
meeting
it
for approval.
contingent upon that 1 vacant position being.
I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Kellenberg.
Good. Next one is the Destination Improvement Committee. On that committee, we had the majority of them returning back. We have 1 person that was appointed late last year that will also be returning for 2 years, and we have 2 new people. So all the positions are filled on that one.
Okay, anybody, any questions, any comments about that? Need a motion.
So moved.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. And thank you to everyone serving on these committees because I know it takes up your time and it's your valuable input is very much appreciated. Okay, thanks, Brian.
ma'am.
Okay, next. Okay, do that. Pardon?
Are we missing one committee? Wasn't there the CEO forum? I think it was a committee, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
the CEO Forum was a group that was formed by Mr. Bagby, and I assume that it's going to continue. It's going to continue. Do we need to? We need to bring that forward.
I don't know that there was any formal selection process or any formal process to form that committee. I don't have any intentions of discontinuing that CEO forum, but as I understand it, there's no process as there has been for these other committees for that forum. So it will
Okay,
move
so just
forward
continue,
as is,
just
yes.
rules, okay.
Okay. So just make a note of that in the minutes, that the CEO committee will continue, roll forward with the current members as selected.
Also, Brian, I don't know
sir.
whether this falls under your bailiwick or not, but there was a North Walton, was that a subcommittee of the marketing committee?
That would be under Pam's
Okay,
direction.
so that's still intact?
Yes, those are 2-year terms, and it's only been in effect for 1 year.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, so that'll continue on as well. Okay, let's see. Request direction from the TDC to recommend BCC landscaping improvements to a county-owned parking lot located at the intersection of Lakewood Trail and Beachfront Trail. This is that parking lot that's
Yes, ma'am.
just north of our beach access there.
Right.
Brian?
It's a little small parking lot. Adjacent property owner requested that we consider landscaping to help as a screening effort between our property and their property. So included in the handout, you have a basic cost estimate and then backup for that estimate. Basically, we're talking about native landscaping, some Yukon hollies. There is some challenges with irrigation, meaning getting water. I mean, there's water available and power available, but meters have to be put in for it. The landscaping, there's a couple options, as you'll see in the estimate from the landscaper, that we could do it without irrigation, but they can't guarantee the planting. So anyway, for a cost not to exceed $11,500, we can landscape the backside of that, put in irrigation, power to the irrigation system, and help beautify that small piece of property as well as screen it from the adjacent neighbors.
Okay, and would that landscaping be on our, is that property, is that ours? Property of
It'll
that
be on our
landscape?
property. It'll be right on the backside of that parking lot as you, I have a
Right, I saw that. Okay, so that's ours. How high would those get?
6 to 8 feet.
6 to 8 feet.
The irrigation option that you got, what you're suggesting tapping into the neighbor.
That was included in their proposal. I don't recommend that. I mean, we can't tap into the neighbor's water supply to irrigate our plants. I mean, to them, it's a viable option. To us, it's not.
Okay, so they offered.
No, they did not offer. He just was out there looking at it and said we could tap into their irrigation system.
Okay, yeah, we don't want to do that.
So, the options as presented are, not to exceed 11,500. We can do it like it should be done, or we can reduce the cost and use manual labor to water and all that. But we can't hold the landscaper responsible for the mortality of the plants.
So Brian, are we looking at the letter that Matt Rivest submitted? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And are you going to go ahead with the Yopon holly shrubs? Okay. I personally think that's a terrible choice.
Okay. What would you recommend?
Well, the problem with Yopons, first of all, they grow very fast, take a lot of maintenance, and they grow kind of wild. You can cut them any way you want. You have a tree, a shrub, a bush,
right.
And you can't kill them, and they just take over things.
Right.
So, I mean, if you want to hide something, that's probably a decent thing to put in. But they do require a lot of maintenance work,
right.
Which I don't think. Why would we want to put something in that requires a lot of cutting and trimming? And
right.
So pittosporum or something like that would probably get the job done a lot better. Anyway, I don't want to get into the landscaping business, but I just don't think that's a particularly good choice.
But because of the elevation difference of the house and the parking lot, we're looking at something that, we're not going to be able to completely screen that 2-story house, from it being able to view the parking lot, but it would help the lower floor to see it. But we asked the landscaper to give us something that was somewhat native and would be, salt tolerant, fairly maintenance free as far as watering and all that. We do realize that it does require cuttings, but we have a dedicated crew to landscaping of our accesses.
Yeah, we do have Valley Crest that's working on the landscape for the bike paths, and then y'all have a group.
We have an in-house group that takes care of our beach accesses, and so they would be tasked with maintaining this parking lot as well. I mean, we already maintain the parking lot.
Okay.
It's just nothing
Okay.
there.
Do I have any questions on that, or any comments, other comments, or?
A few things to mention is, this was not budgeted for this fiscal year, so money would have to be brought forward through a budget
As an amendment, yeah. Okay.
Does this set a precedence?
Well, the
Might come back?
well,
I mean, I'm in favor of doing it, but
Yeah.
Are we going to have to do this all over the county?
Well, what happened
Put in
is,
pumps and power?
well, I don't think, we haven't had any other, there is no other parking lot that we have had complaints on, to my knowledge.
All of our other parking lots, our regional beach accesses have landscaping associated with them already. This one just happens to be a small piece of property the county owned. It was close to our beachfront trail access, so it was, parking lot was put there.
Yeah, it's kind of been kind of neglected because it's not right on the beach. It's been kind of neglected. There is a house right next to it, and with all the increased activity, there's been a lot of cars out there, a lot of activity. So I don't think it's going to set a precedent.
I would recommend if you do put something there, landscaping, put some signage. You have no idea. I mean, I don't know. My property is right next door. I don't know it's a beach access property. Maybe some South Walton signage or something like that. Okay. If it's going to look nice.
We did just recently added some new signage to it to make it more enforceable for overnight parking, but it's a good idea. We'll add our logo to it to make sure everybody understands it's Visit South Walton maintained in a beach access parking lot.
Yeah, that would be good.
To Chairwoman Meadows' point, based off of the description provided by Mr. Kellenberger and Commissioner Meadows about the unique features of the site, the problems that have existed, I believe that will provide a unique distinguishing factual basis should anyone else request this that would make this non-precedential. Each of these cases are case-by-case in basis, as long as we have a record of why we did something on a case-by-case basis, that will usually prohibit someone from saying, well, you've set a precedent, now you must do this.
Correct. So that answers your questions. Okay, does anybody else have any other questions or comments? Okay.
$225 a shrub for Yopon is a lot of money.
Art, I assigned you to the landscaping committee.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. To see if you can find some
to do the landscaping.
See if you can find some. See if you can find some cheaper.
I will.
Cheaper shrubs.
Sure, I will.
Work with Art. And see if you can,
Work day next Saturday.
see if you can get those down from 225.
All right.
Okay.
Teach me to keep my mouth shut, huh?
Okay. Need a motion on this.
Second.
Motion. Second.
Is there a caveat in there that the signage be added so that it's represented well by the county?
We can add that to that motion, but we'll go ahead and do that. We have some extra signage around.
Add signage. Add TDC logo signage. He's already added some other signage, the landscaping. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Like sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Art. If you can find those for under 220, let me
All right.
know.
All right.
Let me know.
I got a deal for you.
I think I tell you what, the Master Gardeners have a tree sale coming up. And that's a great place to get trees. I think it's coming up in the next, Susan, do you know? We got a notice on it, and they sell a lot of things. So anyway, just FYI. Okay. We have the next item on the agenda is Brian as well. Direction from TDC for a recommendation. We need to recommend to the BCC whether to add a regional beach access in the Inlet Beach community. Now, I have a question on that. Regional beach access, that would be restrooms and everything?
No, ma'am, this is a neighborhood beach access. I'm sorry.
So that's incorrect?
Yes, ma'am. The
It
language
should
in there
say
is
neighborhood beach
neighborhood
access.
beach access.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay, so this is a request by Citizens Group in Inlet Beach for a new construction of a new neighborhood beach access on a portion of land that has not been determined who has proper ownership. The land, as you look in your information here, you have a vicinity map and then a location map. The first one shows our large 17-acre park that's Inlet Beach Regional Beach Access. And the next page is the parcel of land in question. It is an L-shaped piece of land that coincides with what used to be the easement associated with the former government lot 234. This lot was subdivided back in the either late 50s, early 60s, and for whatever reason, this portion of land was carved out, and my initial research has not revealed proper ownership. I've requested Walton County Legal Department to do a title search, and they're in the process of doing that, so we don't know exactly who owns it right now.
So should we continue this until you find out who's the...
I think we should discuss it today, and then y'all make a decision on how y'all would like to proceed. So there's some other supporting documents here, pro and con, and I believe there's some people in the audience that would like to speak on this.
Right. I'd like to know, though, that I'd like to know the ownership before we make any decisions. So do you think, when do you think you'll have that ownership worked out?
It'll probably take 30 days or more. Sydney?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Sydney, you want to come up here? This is Sydney. Sydney knows, N-O-Y-E-S.
Yes, ma'am. Brian contacted us, I think about a month and a half ago, requesting a title search on this piece of property. We actually did a really similar title search on another easement, and that took us about 30-45 days. Chrissy in our department is working on coordinating the title search. I think we should have it back by February.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and take comments and discuss it, if that's good with y'all, or how do y'all want to proceed?
Okay.
That's good, okay.
A few other things, there's a cost estimate in here, approximate cost estimate. the Inlet Beach Neighborhood Plan, the original government or Inlet Beach Community Neighborhood Plan layout, original government lot survey, and 2 documents from a recent roadway abandonment, right-of-way abandonment by the adjacent property owners. So I included all that for your information to review. This project, of course, was not budgeted for FY 2016, so a budget amendment would have to be made to bring money forward.
Speaking of budget amendments, Brian, you're gonna bring a budget amendment for
Yes,
that
ma'am.
11,000 to the commission? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So,
that's it.
the right-of-way
Briefly,
abandonment, though, was denied, correct?
I believe it was denied, but
Yeah.
then it was offered for further review based on a technicality, and I'm not sure where it is in the process.
I think it was denied. But
Was it
I
denied
can't-
completely?
But I can't remember. Sydney, do you remember?
Can you clarify right-of-way abandonment?
Yeah, there's right-of-way kind of everywhere, and sometimes people ask for it to be abandoned, so they would get part of it, and the neighbors would get part of it. The county commission does not abandon things anymore, pretty much. I mean, I can't say that.
Thank you, that's
statement.
explained it.
Yeah, we don't abandon, especially things that are close to the beach. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just real briefly to clarify, this is the Millington and Comer abandonment. It was heard by the BCC, I think, sometime in late summer. The BCC did vote to deny it. There was an issue. I think the applicant's attorney was told by planning staff that the matter might be continued. So our office reached out to the applicant's attorney and suggested that he could bring the matter back to the BCC, but they have not yet chosen to do that.
Cindy, has the planning department issued any sort of a statement about this other than what you just said?
No, sir.
So it has to go before the planning?
No, it would come back to the BCC.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So are there any variances that are, that might be required?
No, sir. An abandonment's governed by Florida statute. It's really up to the BCC. It's completely within their discretion to grant it or not grant it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Brian, do we want to take comment now? Is there anyone from the public here to speak on this issue? Okay, Ms. Letcher.
Hi, I'm Betty Letcher. I don't have enough copies, but this came from our president of our Inlet Beach Neighborhood Association that we sent to Cindy, pointing out all the reasons why our neighborhood association is going against this. And here's some pictures if y'all would like to have where it actually is. I live on that little road there, and I know it's been back and forth for years who truly owns even the little road that I live on. It's a dirt road. The one family, the Hannas, that have requested this, requested it a couple of years ago when Dave Sales was head of the beach management. And it was quickly turned down by the present head of TDC at that time. And because I talked to Dave yesterday and I wanted to clarify that. It just didn't go any further. Every house around there would not benefit but one house, and that's a rental house, the couple, the Hannas, that have requested it. Everything else, all of us, we have 3 beach accesses right there with 120 parking spaces. At Inlet Beach, we have 7 beach accesses. I mean, we have plenty. My fear is, and you'll see in those pictures, we already have no parking. One side, on the west side, is the federal land that the TDC, the county, leases, and they maintain it. But everything has to be, my understanding, approved through them before anything's done. I know for a matter of fact, I've had a house there since '78, moved down permanently in '96. I'm the only one on that one little stretch. Now there is a west-east running Emerald Cove. I live on the north part of that, at the other end. I'm the only one on that street. Most of the people, even that maybe have sent in saying they would like that, I have pictures that I can show later if it goes any further. And it has been walked off for all those families, how many feet it would take for them to go to a new walkover versus the one that we already have on the east side. I mean, it's very convenient for all this. So it actually would only benefit one family. I think it's utterly ridiculous for the TDC, or if this is paid by the county, our tax money, to do this for one family that rents their home. They live in South Carolina. I know what's going to happen. I've seen it before we ever got the 3 walkovers that have showers right there. We have a bathroom at the middle one. I mean, we have plenty of coverage. We will see people, even though it says no parking, they will drive down, they will park on the federal land. I've seen people get stuck. Now, the couple that's asking for it, they own the corner lot. Nothing's there. And you'll see in the pictures that they've already blocked off and put no parking. Well, and then where supposedly, or however this stands, the Comer Millington, that are beachfront, that were asking for their easement, this access would be right on the west side. Well, if you see, it would be a sharp turn. So if indeed there was a neighborhood or whatever, then we will have bicycles, we will have golf carts, we will have other people that could park in the 120 spaces, but no, they want to get closer to the beach than, but I've seen it because I live there. And I just, sometimes, you know, I'm not against rentals and all that, but when you live somewhere permanently and you see this day in and day out and you're having to call the sheriff's department to do this or that, it really, really gets old. And to my opinion, whoever owns it, I don't know, it may come back that the county owns that little easement, I don't know. It is a permanent sand dune now that was abused by this one family that told their renters they could walk over. So I went to the TDC, asked Brian, he got permission, as you'll see, to put a fence up there to stop people destroying. Those dunes protect our homes when we have a hurricane.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but the first thing, Brian, you made a comment, this wasn't in the budget, correct?
No, sir, it's not budgeted for FY16.
So I think it's a fiduciary responsibility of all of us. If it's not in the budget now, we've already accepted, or we're going to make an amendment for the 11,000. Now we're close up to 100,000. I think if it's not in the budget, it's not planned, it's not an emergency, we don't move forward. I mean, that's why we do a budget to plan. I know emergencies come up, but this is definitely not an
And we
emergency.
don't have a determination on the actual property right, so.
Okay. Is there, did you have anything else to add? Ms.
I believe
Mitchell?
that's pretty much it. I just
Okay.
know that it will really be a disaster.
Okay.
So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Does anybody else have input on this? Ms. Harris?
Not being ugly, but just FYI, before y'all spend 10 or 11 minutes on something, we ought to be sure that we own the property or don't own it before they waste y'all's time sitting up here and our time that came to visit. The county needs to know what property they own and what property they don't. And it should have been done way before it even went to the BCC. So hopefully, before we ever sit here and waste time again, we at least have the county know whether we own a piece of property or don't.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Ms. Moore.
Thank you. Lee Moore, and I'm representing the Historic Inlet Beach Neighborhood Association Board. I won't take any more time, but for all of the reasons that Betty Letcher just went through, the board does not support this additional beach access either. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? Questions?
Brian, is there anybody else besides this one family that's pushing this?
I received a letter from the Hannahs that had a few of their names attached to it. I would say half a dozen, maybe. There's a group for it and a group against it in Inlet Beach.
Next time it comes on the agenda, would y'all provide the public records, that letters and emails that people have sent? That
Yes,
way,
ma'am. Sure.
People, it'll be in here. Okay. What does the board want to do? Y'all want to continue this until the February meeting, and then that way?
Gary, why don't you make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to scratch it. It's not in the budget. It's not deemed an emergency. We don't need to spend the money.
I second that. Yeah.
Okay, there's a motion to scratch, to deny it, to not recommend anything to the Board of County Commissioners. Is that, yeah, okay. All in favor of the motion not to recommend anything to the Board of County Commissioners with regard to this access? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Like sign. Okay, motion passes. It will not proceed forward.
We'll put it in the file.
Yes, thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is request directions, again, recommendation to the board. Beach vending ordinance revision options identified in the beach vending assessment. Brian, go ahead and give us an update on that.
What I've submitted to you is our 2015 Beach Code Enforcement Summary. It's a multi-page document, narrative, and then the first several pages are our activity report, and it's in 3 different forms. The first one is a condensed version that gives total contacts. The next few pages are per category, and it gives the number of instances, as in the type, as if the item was in compliance, if it was given a verbal warning, a written warning, or a citation. And then the last one is category by action and by officer, so you can see which officers were doing what. And then after that is a narrative. We can step back. Let me go through the whole document first, and we'll step back with questions or discussions about different parts of it. Then there's a summary on the activity report. There's a complaint narrative and summary with some graphs that show the complaints we received, what type they were, what they included, who submitted them. Basically a breakdown. A lot of this information was generated based on questions I received at the end of end of 2014. Complaint log. The beach vendor log, permit log, and then a wildlife lighting ordinance narrative with the wildlife lighting ordinance complaint log, and then a update on the 2015 beach vending code revisions that also includes options, or a request for consideration for options to further revise the ordinance for 2016 to make it easier to understand, make it easier to enforce, and reduce or omit some of the ambiguities and inconsistencies. So, step back to the front. Yes, sir?
Brian, I have a question. It's a question you can't answer, but I'd like your opinion about it anyway.
Okay.
What's your sense of how much coverage we're getting? In other words, we know what you and your team have captured, or wrong word, but what you've done in the way of citing people for violations. What's your sense about the number of people that you don't get to, or that get away with things? I know you can't answer it, but what's your sense about?
Well, this is what I've come to realize in my assessments, is we have 2 types of visitors that come to this beach. We have the locals, and we have people that come for a week or a day or weekend. And so we're out there, and our ultimate goal is to gain compliance. All right. So, there's been talk about we don't write enough tickets, and there's been talk about we write too many tickets, and we don't treat locals fairly, or we don't treat visitors fairly. So I believe that the best way to reach our goal, which is compliance, is for visibility. So, our code enforcement officers out on the beach. The reason I say that is because our visitor guide, the people that come here, their typical excuse is didn't understand the ordinance, didn't know the ordinance. So we give them typically a verbal warning. We have to give them a warning first. They usually get a verbal warning, unless they're obnoxious, then they get a written warning. So to answer your question, I believe that we do get pretty good coverage on the beach with our limited resources. We have 3 code enforcement officers that work 8-hour shifts, and we cover it pretty much from, depending on the season, but during summer season, we're out at 5 a.m. and usually on the beach till 11 a.m. on average 6 days a week. I simply can't cover it 7 days a week with the resources I have. Then during the shoulder seasons, we start a little bit later, 6 or 7 a.m. And then depending, as it gets cooler, we see more bonfires, so we stay out later in the evening. I feel like that we probably deter a good portion of it. But, like I say, with 3 officers riding up and down the beach, some of it being complaint driven, where we're going to a certain specific place to look at something. We're not just cruising. I'd venture a guess that we probably miss between around 50% of it, I'd say, maybe 60% of people that come down. This one are basic violations: glass, dogs. Our vendor are really the biggest issues. Those 3 items are our biggest issues we enforce.
So you're saying you miss 50% of it?
I would say that because we can't be on the beach, and that visibility is our biggest deterrent. When people see us, when the locals see us, then they know that they can't bring their dogs on the beach, or they shouldn't have glass on the beach, and they'll change their behavior. The visitors, once they see us the first time and get a warning if they're out of compliance, then they change their behavior for the rest of the week. So, but like I say, since our guys, sometimes patrol the beach, cruise the beach, sometimes we set up as a focused effort to, based on complaints. Then on those days, of course, we're missing, things that are happening where we're not.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks. I don't want to cut you off, but does anybody else have any other questions or comments from the board?
Brian, if I'm reading this correctly, Exhibit A, here's your proposal for the beach vending?
Right.
So this goes back to kind of like your plan for last year?
Yes, sir. If you go back in the back, under the summary, I'm sorry, I don't have the pages individually numbered, but
it's Exhibit A, proposed
well,
beach
Exhibit
management
A is
plan.
part of it. If you go back about two pages before that, 3 pages before that, you'll find summary. And brief summary about it, and then the second last paragraph listed below are beach vending code revision options that were developed as part of the post-season assessment. Our post-season assessment included a beach vendor meeting at the end of the year to take input from vendors, property owners, resort owners, and just citizens. And so these are the options that we came up with. By far, the biggest problem we had last year was the delineation of vendor zones on the neighborhood beach accesses.
Can I address that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah, we got less complaints this year from District 5 than we did last year on vendors and such. The major complaint was the upland owners. Now, the way the ordinance is written, the upland owners, even if it's a public beach, have the right to write a letter saying that they do not want vending in front of their property. And so the vendor zones were put out last summer without regard to the upland property owners, and we got a lot of calls from the upland property owners who then wanted to write a letter and say, no vending on my beach. So I think that was the main problem I saw. That needs to be worked out. Mm-hmm. There's been talk about taking that right away from the upland owners and not letting them, say no vending. And so there's been talk about that. I don't know what the answer is. I do know that once you give somebody the right to do something and you take it away, they're not very happy about that. Anyway, that was the major thing. I think everything else seemed to work a lot better. The posts that were put out, I think there were some negative comments about that, but the vendor zones in the neighborhood accesses. But I think the main problem was the upland property owner. So I think you've got to solve that problem first before you before next year.
Right.
Can I comment on what Cindy just said?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
I don't disagree with Cindy, and I'm critical of the way we still do it in terms of I think we had less complaints, true, but the same kind of complaints. Largely ghost chairs, big thing. If you went down your list of all the incidents on your list and addressed the ones that had to do with the beach vendors on the regional beach accesses or any of the public beaches, you'd probably eliminate half of those that are related to public things. So I still think this business, in the business of trying to divide up the beach, this is what I heard, because I came to the meeting where the beach vendors were, because I still hear complaints all the time at Grayton Beach. And Grayton Beach particularly, and I know it's neither regional nor neighborhood or whatever, but it's the most public beach we have, and also, of course, the one in Blue Mountain. The same problem exists, and in some ways we exacerbated the problem. The beach vendors don't like it because their guests the guests may not want to sit here. They may want to sit here. Or in Grayton Beach particularly, got the lakes over here for the families with kids. They like to get lined up the lake, so that's not part of the zone. So what we got is we got a situation where we've kind of patchworked something to make it a little better, primarily for the benefit of a very small interest group. That's the beach vendors themselves. What we have done is the beach vendors aren't happy with this thing of having to put them here because that's not where their customers want them. The customers aren't happy, the guests aren't happy that rent the chairs because they can't have them where they want them. The locals aren't happy because they can't come and put their chairs where they want them because they got these ghost chairs all set up. So to me, the only real solution to this is to go to that, request for proposal. Let's get somebody to run those, let's manage the beach. The county and us, we're responsible for beach management. That's part of our call, if you will. To me, we're not managing, we're fumbling along. We're fumbling the ball forward to some extent. What Cindy said is true. I'm not against beach vendors. We need beach vendors. The guests want them, locals want them, we all want them, but we want them to be managed. And we're not managing them. We're pacifying the vendors at the expense of guests, locals, everybody else. So I don't think that answers. To Cindy's specific point, I think that, to me, if the beach is public, it's public. The upland property owners have no business telling anybody that that's not public beach. I think that that's, and I understand the reason they did it. They did it back in the day when they were renourishing some of the beach. They had to give the property owners, that to get the thing passed through. I understand all that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people that just don't want people in front of their houses. People that aren't satisfied that they got a beachfront house. We don't want anybody in our front yard. And it's not their front yard. So I agree with Cindy's point. We need to do that, but we should give that right to vend on the public beaches. If there is a right to vend on the public beaches, they should have the right. So that's how I view it. I don't think we fixed anything. I think we put a patch on it, one patch on a tire where it was leaking. We got a bunch of other leaks still going on. So I would encourage, I hope that this whole proposal, which implement a public beach management plan, which is what you wanted to propose last year, somehow got watered down to this business of let's divide up the beach. I'm sorry, it's not working well. Would you say it's working well?
Well, it solved the problems that we had. The biggest problem is it's a turf war between vendors and vendors and the general public that wants to use their own equipment. So we solved that problem at the regional beach accesses. Solved the problem, might not be the best solution, but it did somewhat solve the problem. We gave the opportunity for the guy that comes down at 10 a.m. in the morning to have the opportunity to get some waterfront beach. Now, what you're alluding to is a better system that really more fits the image of what we want South Walton to be. Nice, well-managed beach where everybody lives in harmony. And
right.
So I have that listed as one of the options.
Obviously, you think that's the best solution.
I think that is a viable solution, and I believe that it goes in concert with the Visit South Walton attitude, as well as what the BCC attitude, I believe, is that we want South Walton to be a nice place that people come to visit and come back.
One other point on this that I think that I want to make is that this is public beach. What we're doing is we're selling out the public beach to vendors. We're preventing the public from using the beach to some extent. That's what we're doing. And to me, that's in every way you can imagine, that's wrong. We should be encouraging use of the public beaches and make it easier for people to use the public beaches, and give the locals some space here. I mean, we're hurting ourselves, and just to, I don't want it to be about me, because I have a business and I have guests are our business. And when the guests come back to me and complain about the situation on the beach, then to me that problem becomes very real, just like, because it could affect me. I'm not saying it has, but Grayton Beach is not being well treated. And also another thing I noticed you say, don't drive on public beaches. I think that's...
We had some challenges at Grayton Beach because of its unique character, with its ability to drive on it. Vendors have what we call recreational permits. They're not really supposed to be using them. We try to keep them I wouldn't say beat down, but in compliance. But yeah, there are certain challenges at Grayton Beach. We set up a vendor zone.
Does anybody else have any other input on this? Do we need to take some public input, or do anybody have any questions? Or I think Brian's done an excellent job at summarizing everything that's happened this past year.
In all sincerity, I just have to say I'm a little sheltered from that, being in the Sandestin area, so I cannot speak educatedly enough to even make a comment. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the question is, like you said, is one of the things is to manage the situation where the county would have a number of vendors and would be in control of their activities and that kind of thing. So that's one of the proposals.
Yes, ma'am.
The other proposals, do nothing, just keep like we did last year.
Basically what I did is I took the three sections of the beach vending ordinance that we, during our postseason assessment, we realized were the ones that had the most complaints, the most non-compliant issues associated with them. The biggest one being the neighborhood beach access and the Upland property written authorization.
Okay.
So then I have three options listed for that.
Okay.
Something has to be done there, because right now we have a conflict. We
We're
permit delivery vendors to go vend there, but then they can't get authorization to vend there.
Right.
And so we have to enforce it. Last year we were basically complaint driven on that. Towards the end of the season, we became more proactive on it because of the numerous complaints.
So where are your three?
If you go to the page that is the summary, which is 3 pages before the Exhibit A.
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
2 pages before Exhibit A.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Find Exhibit A, go back 3 pages, you'll find it says summary.
Okay.
About a third of the way down the page.
2.
And then in the last paragraphs there are my 3 sections. Continues on to the next page.
Okay, so it's 1, 2, and no, I see 4 and 5.
Well,
Brian, next time would you paginate, would you put number pages on it?
Yes, ma'am.
On this thing?
I realize that.
That would be great.
Is this the page you're referring to? Can you see that? Summary page?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Summary, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so 1, 2, I see, okay. So 1, 2, and 3 are your, are the options.
1, 2, and 3, the major numbers are the code sections that I'm requesting consideration for revisions to be made to. And then under each one of those, A, B, and C, you have the different options that I have listed that I would like to be considered.
Okay.
Because our job is to recommend, for us to recommend to you to propose one thing or the other, or a combination.
You can propose whatever you want to go to the Board of County Commissioners.
Right. The actual request is to, for consideration and recommendation to the BCC to consider these options.
Well, I would like to recommend that we recommend to the BCC that they implement a public beach management plan like you wanted to do last year, that you're proposing again this year as an alternative. I understand it's an alternative, but based on the fact that if you looked at, once again, look at your complaints, look at how you responded to them, how many of them wouldn't even exist? And how many less things do you have to enforce if you had this? You would only be enforcing with one vendor at each location or some combination that would give you the ability to manage. I would even suggest, and I don't know if you can put this in the recommendation or not, that the county at these regional beach accesses literally build places to store the chairs, to rent the chairs from. The chairs don't have to get on the beach till the people get there. The whole thing is nobody should be able to have a chair unless they're there.
Yeah,
that is simple
that's
as
actually
that.
part of the management plan. We would, require the successful vendor to, provide those facilities. But it's all managed, it would all be laid out. They'd have a specification they have to follow. It'd make it easier to manage, easier to enforce, and I believe it'd make that section of the beach harmonious to all the people that visit it.
And I think that's particularly important when the very last thing you said about it being harmonious and being, about South Walton and what we're about, the kind of place we are. When you get people angry or upset or just discontented in some way because they come to the beach and they've got these chairs lined up, nobody's sitting in them, that situation still exists. Maybe it's only on this half, but it still exists. And it's really not right to deprive the public of their access to the beach. We call them public access. Well, it's a little not exactly true the way it's working today.
Let me ask you a question, Brian, on how this is organized. The summary, okay, so if we were going to recommend one of these to the board, it looks to me like number 1 is something, number 2 is something, and number 3 has D, and then is it 1, 2, or 3, or is it?
Yeah, number 3, 2260A is the policy. That's the very first paragraph in the beach vending ordinance, and basically it says that you as the county has the right and the obligation to regulate the beach.
Okay, so number 3 would be the beach management plan.
Right.
With the regulation, okay. And number 1 is just another version of what we could do, and number 2 is another version of what we could do.
Yes, ma'am. You go down that outline right there. Number 3 is the main heading, and you have the options A, B, C, and D. A would be maintain existing ordinance, enforce as detailed, make no revisions. We're prepared to do that, but the problem is there's going to be a lot of grief at the neighborhood beach accesses because we'll have to enforce.
Right. Okay, so what is Art, go ahead.
Thank you. Brian, I think we're getting caught in the tall weeds here.
Yes, sir.
And I don't think it's our responsibility to design a policy. And what I would suggest, a simple solution, Kurt obviously is very knowledgeable about this, very passionate about it. Is it possible for the two of you to get together and come back with something that is a clear recommendation as opposed to A, B, or C, something that takes into account all the issues that you face and that Kurt raised, and then that would make it a whole lot easier rather than us sitting here trying to debate whether we should do A, B, or C.
Can I make a comment on that? The Board of County Commissioners is going to have the final decision.
Right.
If he gets with him and then it goes into February, we're looking at the season. We need to do something PDQ. So what my recommendation is that we move something to the Board of County Commissioners, and it can be discussed there, and if Kurt wants to insert different things, he can, but I think we need to make a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners to get it to a public hearing, to get it done before the next season. So that would be my recommendation, rather than having one individual talk with another individual. It's really just going to be...
The truth is, Brian and I have talked about this because I've been concerned about it.
And I think what needs to happen is when it goes to the board, people who have input on the board need to show up at the county commission and based on their different circumstances with bed tax collections, need to speak then. And I'm not trying to cut you off, Art, but I see how things get mired down, and if we're into February, then we're into March, and then we're into the summer. So that would be my recommendation.
I don't disagree with that. I just don't want to recommend something that we're not wholeheartedly committed to. And at this point, we don't seem to be committed to it.
Well,
we're not really sure what it is.
I think that we could make a recommendation that the board take a look at these 3 options and discuss them and then make a decision. I mean, and we could also say that the consensus on the board was to go with number 3, which was a public beach management plan, and then let the details be all worked out based on some of these things, because it will be tweaked.
Basically, what I've presented here is 3 different areas of the ordinance that I'm asking for consideration for revisions to. And I've listed up some options that were developed through our postseason assessment.
Okay, so these are not 3 different options. These are 3 different sections of the ordinance that
Yes,
need to be,
ma'am.
okay.
And then under
So-
each one of those sections, you have 3 or more options. Actually, under 2, you have 2 options. And, you know, normally, one of the options is maintain the existing, don't do anything. And then you have other options that help the casual beachgoer understand the ordinance better and help us enforce it better. So really, what I think is here is I've asked for consideration by the council to look at these and say, yes, these are all viable options, and we recommend the BCC consider these options and take some action on them.
So,
are you comfortable with?
Let me clarify. Each of them are separate items.
Yes, sir.
So we would say, for example, we could recommend you go with 1 and 2, and then on 3, we could recommend you put these options in number 3, or we recommend a given option. We could do that. Seems to me like last year that once again this thing got watered down, and when we get to the public hearing, you know, all we're talking about is whether we're going to divide the beach up into vendor sections versus other sections. And as the meeting I went to with the vendors, with the complaints that we have, and just, you know, talking to people, it appears to me that the way to solve the problem, I mean, say you're never going to solve all the problems, but to greatly alleviate the problem is D. But for some reason, there's a resistance. The resistance has to do with, well, we got these small business guys. Well, we're probably not going to have less employees overall. We're probably not going to have less beach vendors. Most of them also vend in private situations. Mm-hmm. You know, if you have a fair situation where people are able, the vendors that are qualified, and you know, you qualify them anyway, so that they could bid on this thing, and we could come up with something that would essentially. I mean, I guess it's better to ask you, how much of the problem would we solve that way? How do you feel about what is the best solution? To me, you know, the TDC is given this responsibility, and then further is given to you, and yet you have an idea of what we want to do, what we really should do, what's the best solution, and somehow that doesn't get aired properly. And to me, for me, what I want to recommend is, yeah, we recommend you look at 1, but I say what we should be recommending is the best solution. Mm-hmm. You know, if the Board of County Commissioners wants to water it down, they should have to do it in a public forum where people can say, wait a minute, because I believe that the reasons I expressed, you know, magnified, really, mm-hmm. I don't see how you can say don't do it. Oh no, the poor beach vendors. I'm not against beach vendors. Mm-hmm. Send people to use them. We need them, but we need to manage the thing.
Okay,
Right.
so go ahead.
But I think you're just asking us to send these recommendations to the BCC, not for us to select A, B, or C.
You can put emphasis on which one you think is the best viable solution, but what I am asking for is for all these options to be considered by you
Let's
and
look
then
at-
recommended to the BCC for consideration.
Let's look at number 1. Let's take them one by one. Right. Number 1, is there a consensus on which option that the TDC would recommend? On number 1, because this is a section of the code, and they've got 3 options there, A, B, and C. Limit commercial vending, discontinue vendoring zones, or remove or omit the verbiage that requires upland property owners written. See, the way this is laid out, it's a little bit tricky. It's not really your options. It's really what's in the code.
If I may, Commissioner.
Go ahead.
I think the recommendation needs to be that, and I agree with the urgency because there's people's livelihoods at stake here, and purchasing equipment and all of those things. And I'm not sure what committees you've had, but my recommendation would be that there needs to be a committee of a good cross-section of representatives to put together a plan to recommend to the BCC. Because I don't think we can
Is there a public
community.
comment? I think the TDC, though, the council, we can make recommendations as to what's good for our visitors and our locals and the county. And so I think that's what we're here to do. So we can make a recommendation that we pass these on to the board, but that the consensus of the board is that we need to get a hold of this, and we need a beach management plan, and we need to, well, like you said, get a group, hash this out. But by the time you get a group and hash all this out,
again, this is a long-term issue. It's not any different than parking and other issues in the county. And I agree with Kirk. We're putting Band-Aids on stuff that we need a long-term plan.
Jim, Jim Bagby, did you have a comment on this? And then we're going to wrap this up at 10:15 because we're going to get out of here today before before it gets dark. So you got 6 minutes.
Jim's going to help us do that.
My name? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner and council members. We've kind of got the order reversed here. If you go to number 3 first, that's why it's section A in the ordinance. If you want to recommend a policy that says we're just going to do an RFP and we're going to have 1 vendor, or we're going to have 5 vendors, or we're going to have 10 vendors, then that's what you recommend. That was not what, and you talk about a committee, that's not what the folks, and I think Kurt and Brian will attest, who attended the after-season, after-action meetings recommended. What they addressed the 2 main policies or issues that we had this last summer that Commissioner Meadows recommended. One was the public beaches, particularly in the Seagrove area, but they're all through the county. The public beaches where the upland property owner who did not own the beach had the right to say yay or nay to vending in front of their house. And we actually crafted verbiage, and it's somewhere in the minutes, that said properties beachfront that had not had a renourishment project, okay, so we still protected those beachfront owners in the western part of the county that had a beach nourishment project, because they had been promised that if you let us add this beach south of your property or seaward of your property, we won't let vendors sit up there willy-nilly without your permission. But property that had not, public beach that had not received a beach nourishment, the right of the upland property owner would, they would not have the right to say yay or nay to vending.
Right.
And so that was what came out of that meeting. And I think y'all will both agree with that, and whoever else was at that meeting. That's key, because that was a main problem. That's why the post kept shifting all summer and why a lot of the complaints. So if you have that caveat in there, then you solve that. The other main complaint, and that's on your number 1 and 2, I believe. Number 1, I might disagree with the verbiage a little bit. It's not the remove or omit the verbiage that requires the uplands project. It grants them the right to say yay or nay. It doesn't require, the requirement is a verbiage that says they have to have it for private property. We're only dealing with public beach in this. Mm-hmm. The second one, the second big complaint on public beaches was all the storage of chairs by vendors overnight, whether it be at the toe of the dune or at the base of the walkover or whatever. The people, not the vendors obviously, but people were pretty much against that. And so that's the other issue that you have to deal with, is the storage on public beaches of vending equipment overnight. But really, you don't have to deal with either one of those if you do number 3. If you do option number 3 and say, we're just going to do an RFP and we're going to go to a vendor and then we'll work out a management plan, then that's what you do. The other thing I will tell you, or the other comment I will make, is I want to reinforce what Commissioner Meadows told you. You got to do something today. We got in this, you know, the commitment of the TDC was to come back to y'all in December and take it to the Board of County Commissioners in December, because last year, you know, we kept going through this review and trying to refine it and everything, and it was May before the Board of County Commissioners finally got the ordinance adjusted. And to your point, that's too late. People have
can't do
already
that
bought
again.
equipment, people have already done
can't do
everything.
that again.
They've got
Yeah.
their business plans, they've
Okay.
hired their people.
Yeah, I think based on what Jim says, what I see falling out of this is the same thing. Do we want, option one is to change the, is to look at the two sections that are problems, public and storage. Look at those, that's one. And then the second would be to recommend a public management plan. And I think we could probably do both. We could probably say, look at these and let's work on a public management plan.
I would agree with that, because I think the most important thing that Jim said is that with the renourishment that happened several years back, if you promise the public something and then you take it away now, there won't be a chance in HE double hockey sticks ever to get another nourishment or whatever program going.
Right. Well, I think that, to Cindy's point, I think that problem needs to be fixed no matter what else gets done.
Yeah, it does.
So that's a for sure thing that needs to be fixed. But I do think that, once again, Brian proposed the beach management plan last year because that's what he thought was the best idea. It's just basically the same proposal this year, and it moves us forward. I want to make a recommendation that we consider one.
Okay.
And I don't know if we consider two, since we're considering it independently of three, if you will.
Madam Chair, let me make a suggestion without complicating matters anymore. Obviously, we've got three separate issues here. What if your recommendation was for us to craft a holistic beach management plan that addressed not only the upland property owners issue, but it also addressed the vending issue, and in that same plan, we could address the storage at the toe of the dunes.
Well, and this does that. I think this does that. I think we need to say, I think we need to do what you said. I think we need to get a consensus on whether we want a beach management plan. I think your motion was that the consensus is that we need a beach management plan, and this or partially this is what we want to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners. Is there a motion on that?
I'll make a motion to make that recommendation to implement a beach management plan.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor of sending a beach management plan as the consensus of the TDC board, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Okay, the second item would be that would go forward to the Board of County Commissioners. That's what would go forward to the Board of County Commissioners. Well, no, it would not be an RFP in and of itself. It would be a recommendation to adopt an ordinance that would the vendors would become county RFP vendors. They would be the county contractors. And that would be what that plan would be. Now, if the board wants to do something different, that's their prerogative, but this is what is coming out of the TDC, from what I understand.
So we are suggesting they do an RFP so that the vendors want to make.
Yes, I think that's the board's consensus. Thanks, Stan. Yeah, I think if we rework this anymore, I think we go with this, and then we talk about this, we discuss this, and see what the Board of County Commissioners does.
As part of that RFP, those vendors could be part of the management program for glass and all those other issues that are on the beach. They could be held to those standards and help that.
Verbiage of 2260, they're required to pick up their sections of the beach and stuff like that.
I mean, as it relates to guest services, helping out the three guys, the three shifts to get better cover, better than 50% coverage.
It's 10:15, so we're moving on. Thanks.
Excellent, Commissioner.
Thanks. So that's going to go to the board like that. Okay. Let's see. The next issue is the next item on the agenda is TDC. Let's see. Where are we? Oh yeah, strategic planning services. Recommendation regarding the issuance of an RFP to expand the scope of services for strategic planning to include the following. And Mr. Sunday, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, and good morning, council members. The first item that you have there is we're requesting a recommendation from you as regards the scope of services for strategic planning and whether or not to expand that scope of services. If you recall, some time back, issued an RFP for strategic planning services that resulted in an agreement with Strategic Advisory Group. In your packet is the agreement with that company and the scope of services. If you recall, and might I add, that was at an amount of $28,500. If you recall, back November 4th, 5th, and 6th, the group came in and conducted one-on-one sessions with each of you, with commissioners and with several different stakeholders. After those meetings, we had a conversation, and his comment to me was that we had some underlying issues and a whole lot of moving parts. He made a recommendation that this would be an opportune time to address some of those issues. I asked him to go back and identify those for me. He sent me those 4 bullet points, and you can see what they are there. The problem, or the issue, the dilemma that we're in at this point is we think that maybe this is an opportune time to take a more holistic approach. However, it's council's opinion that because this is a different scope of services and an increased amount, that it would need to go back through the competitive RFP process. And so by doing that, we miss our window of opportunity on some of these things. So that's the conundrum that we're in. We think it's a good time to address it more holistically, but.
Okay, yeah. But it couldn't be added on as an amendment to the original scope of services that we tasked these people with?
My concern is twofold, Commissioner. One, when we looked at this approximately 3 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, Mr. Sunday and I did, the additional items they requested to submit were well outside the broad scope, even as broad as it was written initially for the RFP. So the question is, if those had been submitted in the initial RFP, would anyone else have bid or wanted to bid, and would it have altered any other pricing? Certainly the price was substantially different. They've come back now and folded some of these in and said, well, we can do them within these buckets if we say this, notwithstanding whether or not a creative wording would be sufficient if someone were to challenge that. I think the cost difference alone necessitates it. My concern is whenever you go out for any kind of contract, any kind of services, and you say, this is what we want, and we evaluate them and we award a contract for a price, then you change that and there was no indication that you were going to change the scope or that it was going to be negotiated after award. Anybody else who bid or didn't bid could come back and say this was not fair to us, this was not a competitive process. So my concern is, yes, we do lose time, and I am sensitive to that. However, if you receive a challenge in the middle of this, it will stop everything we're doing, and we'll be out a whole lot more money than what it would cost just to rebid it.
So how long would it take us to go through this process and get it?
If we expedite the RFP process and put it out for bid, we could have a contract or an agreement awarded in 60 days at best.
30, 60 days, so that puts you in
45 to 60.
Then you have the holidays, and then
I would like to make a motion to recommend to stick to the original plan. Again, everything we're doing so far, 11,000, almost 100,000. We're already up to $150,000, $140,000 higher if we would have passed everything.
So stick with the original strategic planning scope of services and.
Can any of these recommendations be done in-house?
Not really, because it's pretty much an expertise that, it's pretty much an expertise that is coming from groups that do destination marketing and destination recommendations. I mean, we could do it, but
Jim, the one part that might be feasible to do in-house would be the long-term capital plan.
Yeah.
We could probably do that. But the others would, like Commissioner said, require that expertise.
Well, it might be, though, worth doing because refinement of current oversight and governance approach. You know, we're going to have some people come and speak to us about the different structures the TDC could take on. Mm-hmm. And these people, whoever does this, could guide us in that, which I think would be very helpful. We might miss the recruitment and transition of a new executive director because of the time, but the rest of the things could be beneficial.
Did everybody meet with, did all of us meet with this guy? Did you meet with this guy here?
I'm sorry.
Did you meet with these people?
With
Ram?
Yeah. Did everybody? Yeah, everybody met with him.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you.
Well, my feelings, much like Cindy's feeling, is that these people know what they're doing. And obviously, if we brought them in here in the first place, we're saying we don't know exactly what we're doing, or we can use some help in what we're doing. And to me, it makes sense, and especially after visiting with them and their recognition that the ball had moved some, or that the game had changed a little bit. So I think that, we should be doing this.
His comments to me were, I thought I was coming in to look at this, and then I found all this.
Well, that is true, because he met with Jim, and then there's the transition. Now they're coming back, and it's a whole different ball of wax, and we're looking at analyzing different structures and all this kind of thing. So is there? And
one thing that he said that I think is valuable from his standpoint is, we're talking about governance models, and we're talking about having a discussion about privatization. He's heard from all of you. He's heard from commissioners. He's heard from all the stakeholders, and I think the benefit in having him structure that conversation would be, okay, let's talk about let's talk about the current model, and how can we improve the current model? What are the pros and the cons of the current model? And let's talk about privatization. What are the pros and cons of that? And then maybe some hybrid of the two, and the pros and cons of that.
We had that discussion, and I thought that was part of the original proposal, being that we were having that discussion one-on-one. I don't know if anybody else did, but it was brought up.
Yeah, I just think that in those discussions, a lot more came out than what he originally thought he was getting into.
Yeah, I think he was going to do a strategic plan, and he shows up, and we're saying, well, we need to we need you to recreate the.
And so the question is, do we miss the opportunity and have something that may or may not be useful to us, or take advantage of the opportunity?
What's everybody?
Yeah, to Clay Atkinson's point about the contractual or the legal issues, I totally agree with what he's saying. However, Mr. Fenton has already invested a lot of time in learning. If we were to go to another vendor, we're going to have to pay for somebody else to get to where Mr. Fenton is right now. So, but that's not a contractual issue. That's just a business fact that we're going to wait probably 2 or 3 months until whoever the selected vendor gets to the point where Mr. Fenton is already. So there's a reason to keep Fenton on. The other thing, I think, in fairness to him, was that I noticed both in my private conversation with him and in the public session that he had the next day, that he was kind of shell-shocked at what he had been told versus what he found out. And I don't think anybody tried to deceive him. It's just that he came in here with one set of guidelines and then found something else. He did, in my estimation, he did a lot of work, or was doing a lot of thinking along the lines of what we already have. In terms of market research, market segmentation, he was talking about doing those things. I'm not sure he realized that a lot of that information has already been done by Dr. Downs. So that, again, is no fault of Mr. Fenton's. He didn't know that.
And Mr. Fenton would probably have a leg up in the RFP.
Absolutely.
When it came to, I'm not saying that he would get it, but he would be qualified to do it. So there's questions in the audience. I see Mr. Bagby.
Quick question, actually, Madam Chair, for Clay, because I see, being intimately familiar with the RFP, I see 1 and 3 as being able to be folded in the RFP, because those are strategic planning issues specifically. I agree, number 2 has nothing to do with anything that was ever contemplated within the RFP framework. And that should be pulled out. Number 4, I can actually argue both ways. It is a strategic, part of any strategic component or strategic planning process is the funding of that plan. And so I would ask the chair to ask the council or the executive director, could you do 1 and 3 and possibly 4 and expand and continue to use the strategic advisory group and withdraw number 2? Because that obviously is not a strategic planning initiative.
Let's ask Attorney Atkinson. What do you think about that?
I don't disagree with what Mr. Bagby said. I think that's why what we have in front of us is something closer. Now, what we looked at, again, approximately 2.5 weeks ago was substantially different than this. And I saw this last night for the first time, and they said, well, we'll fold things in. This can be part of strategic planning. And they've certainly come back and done that. So I don't disagree with anything of what he said of what falls both ways. My suggestion to you is anyone that you find close or arguable, and I understand why Mr. Bagby says you could argue that one either way, is probably better to err on the side of caution. My concern comes back to they submitted us a proposal that did not have this in it at a specific price, then came back and said, well, we can do more, and it would cost you more. Now, if it is the council's direction to say, look, we feel like some of these services were implicit within the RFP, we would like to see a number from them on that. Again, you haven't advertised that it was going to be negotiated or you're going to enter into negotiations for the scope of work or for the price. Notwithstanding that, it's a close call whether they would be able to.
So would you, if you were sitting up here, would you take that liability on? I mean, because when you talk about bids and process all that, that's when you really get in trouble.
And that's obviously what my concern is, to take the conservative approach on that. I guess my question to you would be this as a policy consideration. You could certainly take that chance and nobody say anything and it goes just fine. On the other hand, the question is, if you do that and somebody comes back and says, well, I would have bid this if I'd have known this was part of it. If I'd have known you wanted more than just what they proposed or what I thought you were proposing, I could have given you that and I could have done it for this. Then I can assure you we're going to slow down this whole process. We're not going to be going forward with this group while that's in contest. It's going to take a lot longer. So my comparison that I've used with other boards to cut this short for you is, it's like your decision to exceed the speed limit on the interstate. Does everybody do it? Pretty much. Does it get you there faster? Yes. But there is a calculated gamble that if you get caught, you're going to get there a lot slower. It's going to cost you more.
I think I understand that too, and I have to agree with that. But yeah, you don't want to get into the weeds in these types of bid processes. So do I have, are there any other questions? Ms. Harris? And then we will wrap it up at 10:35.
Add one thing to Madam Chair, is the latest version, the latest proposal that he gave me, he did dovetail these items into those overall initial tasks, and his fee proposal is now $59,000 overall, as opposed to what you see in your agenda as an additional 42 on top of the 28.5.
Okay, but the attorney is suggesting that's still kind of gray.
Right.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Harris.
I'd just like to say, as a bed tax collector, I hope we're making major steps to get an executive director. We don't need an executive director that comes in May or June. And we need a committee. Somewhere on this agenda, there should have been to appoint a committee once this goes out to review all the applications like we had last time. And it needs to be made up of bed tax collectors. Somehow, I feel like that the bed tax collectors aren't always totally informed, because, and one example of that is one member of this board called another one after Jim was terminated and went, what happened to Jim Bagby? So, you know, this board's got to get fully informed on everything that goes on, and so do the bed tax collectors that collect the bed tax. But we just can't keep fooling around. I asked at the last BCC meeting, and I was told that the ad for the executive director was ready to go out. Not the last BC, the one before that was ready to go out, and it hadn't been advertised yet. We've got to get on the stick for the bed tax collectors and for this whole community, that we're not just floating around here with 2-hour presentations on beach vendors and all this. We've got to get on the stick and get an executive director quick.
Okay, let's take up the issue of this first, and then we'll talk about the, if y'all want to talk about the executive director position. Let's take up the issue of what we want to do with this. Do we want to go out for an RFP for these additional services? Maybe deleting the second one because it's more time sensitive, or do we want to just go with the services that they've proposed and that we've contracted them with?
Let me suggest one way we might be able to deal with this without creating a problem that Mr. Atkinson raised. If in the RFP that we put out, we require or we stipulate that a certain amount of work be a prerequisite. In other words, state in the RFP that we would like to have someone who already has a grasp of the issue. That more or less precludes people who have never dealt with the TDC before. It's done all the time. And I'm not saying it's totally above board, but you can do that.
Can you do that?
You can basically do whatever you want. To that end, though, might I make an additional suggestion that perhaps when you go back out in something that I know Commissioner Meadows is going to be much more familiar with. Do it as an RFQ rather than an RFP, and this is where we get into these semantics and letters and things like this that are so annoying to deal with. But with a request for qualifications, you're asking somebody to submit their qualifications to perform a certain type of work for you. You select the most qualified submittal and then enter into negotiations for a specific price for a scope of work that you define. It is entirely possible that who comes in may have different skill sets, and therefore they need to tailor their proposal one way or another. In a case like this, given how we've had this already evolved, that makes a little more sense to me, and it would not lengthen the process, in my opinion, if we expedite getting it out.
Okay.
Does that sound, Stan, like something that makes sense?
We can do that. That does make sense.
Do I have a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to that effect.
Okay.
Second.
State the motion.
Really? Let's make a motion to submit an RFQ, as Mr. Atkinson has suggested, and a request for qualifications of someone to conduct this kind of work, and then we can negotiate a price.
Okay, now, would that include support recruitment and transition of a new executive director?
Well, I don't want to get off on another tangent here, but to Ms. Harris' point about the recruitment process, if we are going to look at options in terms of privatization, or Mr. Fenton suggested at least 3 different structures that we might come up with, and he is going to, or he would be in a position to recommend the pros and cons of each of those. I think depending on which way it falls out, that can have some effect on the kind of person you hire to be an executive director.
So leave it in there?
Well, but no, to hire someone, and then let's say we hire someone who's got general manager qualifications, and then we turn around and structure the TDC so that it's basically a marketing organization, then we have the wrong kind of person running the organization. So I think yes, we want to hire someone as quickly as possible, but we don't want to hire the wrong kind of person because we haven't yet agreed on what kind of a structure we're going to have.
I think that the Board of County Commissioners just made that decision that we could not wait we could not wait, and that we needed to go ahead and get the RFQ out, and that if we advised the people that were interviewing for the job that, we're looking at doing this, this, and this, that they are noticed, that if you do change the structure, that it would change.
That's fine, but I'm just saying, if you hire someone and then you change the structure, it doesn't make sense.
We would advise them that we are looking at changing the structure.
Good.
So maybe to support the transition, but not necessarily the recruitment, because we're going to miss that.
Right. Support the transition. How about that?
Yeah, I have no problem with the transition. It's just the recruiting process.
Okay.
I don't see him being involved in that.
That's a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Everybody understand the motion?
But But again, it was 58,000, correct, versus 42?
59.
59 total.
Well, if we do qualifications, then we negotiate the price.
Right.
Okay.
See, we can get the qualified firm, and then sometimes we can talk them down.
And if we take some of that out, obviously, the recruitment would require him to come here.
Can roll into the original plan, right?
No, we have to do a new RFQ. To do a new RFQ, and then we would get a price. It looks like it would be somewhere, but 42.5 or lower, because we are taking out one of the components of the.
Well, do we all feel strongly that these 4 bullet points are that important?
I do.
I think 1 and 3 are.
I would say so too, just based on the conversation we had with these people and what their kind of, the insight they had, because everything had changed. It makes sense to me.
I think it's important because we're looking at, we've kind of come to a watershed event, and we're looking at, do we want to change things? Do we not? Tell us what our options are.
But are these is this the right group to do that?
Well,
because they were hired for something very different.
It may not be this group. This would be an RFQ. We would ask for qualifications from everybody, and this group may submit, and other groups may submit, and then it would be up to us to select whoever we thought was best qualified. It may not be this group, or then again, it may. So it doesn't, this is not saying that we're hiring the same group to do this. This is just saying that we are changing the scope of services and putting it out to bid again.
And you would remove the recruitment and the capital plan?
I think the motion was just remove the recruitment. Yeah.
And Mr. Brillmeyer, to your point, there was about 91,000 budgeted for this process.
But they're budgeted in this budget year.
In the budget, yes.
And so,
28 of that?
That was the price that it was negotiated down to.
Is that what we paid so far, is 28?
28.5.
Okay. Okay. Everybody ready for a vote? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Like sign. The motion carries. Okay, Stan, are we good with how we're proceeding on that?
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and if you can get that, expedite that.
I will, certainly. The next item is a request for your direction to enter into discussions and negotiations with Mr. Clinton Jones in reference to a long-term lease for parking on the parcel located on the northeast corner of County Road 38 and 393. Had a conversation with the owner of the property, who's Mr. Clinton Jones. Initially thought that there may be an opportunity for a purchase there. Turns out that no, but he is interested in talking about some sort of long-term lease. So before we start having those more detailed conversations and negotiations, we wanted to get your recommendation and the BCC's approval to move forward with that process.
You said there was some conversation about purchase, but then that went away. Was there some specific reason that went away?
We thought that initially he was interested in selling it, and then he said, no, I'm not, but I would be interested in a long-term lease.
If we did a long-term lease, would it be possible to put in there some kind of right of first refusal if we decided to market it?
I would presume that would be part of our negotiations.
Yeah, that's
yeah. I understand it. He has had several discussions with other people as well, so I would ask exactly what Kurt just said to make sure that it cannot be marketed if we have a long-term lease.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. And we have first option to purchase.
He also is in some discussions with a developer, but he has not signed a contract with them. So.
Okay.
When you say long-term lease, how long a term are we talking about?
Again, that would come out of the discussions, but I was thinking along the lines of 25 to 50 years anyway.
Is he thinking that? Have you had any conversation that indicated that he would go for that long of a time?
Possibly, yes.
It's a great piece of property. if the county were looking at a broader scope of a parking plan, it may not include that piece of property. If we were able to get some regional parking accesses and some sort of tram system for drop off and that stuff, that property may come out of play. I would say if there's a short-term lease, maybe a 1 or 3 year, maybe a 3-year lease, then that might be a better play for the county till we get a bigger plan. But
maybe a 5-year.
That's still a Band-Aid.
Things can go fast.
That piece of property, leasing that piece of property, is still a Band-Aid on the overall issue.
Well, and one thing too, when you think about it, if let's say we rented it for 50 years, and I don't know how much it's going to cost every year. I would imagine he would put an escalator in there. So, obviously we would do an analysis of, could we buy it for the amount that we would lease it for 50 years, and then we would own it. And then we could do.
How much did we lease it for last year?
I believe it was $3,600 a month is what we paid for.
I think it was 6, 9, 10 or 12,000. But it probably at a long-term lease, he's probably going to have an escalator. But that's just so. Are we in concert with having Stan go to him and negotiate something and bring it back? No. And with some direction that we think maybe, like you said, a shorter time period may. One of the things that people were thinking about was purchasing it and building a parking garage there. A parking deck there.
Did you just say that out loud?
Yeah, I did say that out loud. That has been discussed in the long-range, big picture scope of things. Paid parking, with possibly retail on the first floor. That kind of mixed-use product has been looked at, maybe somewhere in the future. But I think we don't want to lose the.
Right. We obviously need that place for parking.
I make the motion to absolutely go
But
forward.
do we, the question is the term, is this, do we want him to negotiate for a 25 to 50-year lease, or do we want him to negotiate for a shorter term lease?
Well, again, we can have that discussion because it's going to be part of the discussions and negotiations. So right now, we're just requesting to get into the negotiations discussions.
Correct.
So, could you discuss both a lease and a possible purchase option at some point?
Together and
sure.
There, all our concerns can be addressed there. So
we can address, different terms of different lease options.
Just out of curiosity, is Clinton Jones related to any other Jones in Walton County?
Not to my knowledge.
No, not to my knowledge.
That happens occasionally.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, motion carries. Okay, next.
Next item.
Stan, let me back up for a minute. Has the TDC director position been advertised?
Yes, ma'am, it has, and I have all that for you in your updates.
Okay, good.
If you want to address that now, I can
No. Go ahead and move along on here.
Okay. Next item in your packet is the 2 letters, one that has been drafted by council to the Auditor General's office, and the second one that's been drafted also by council addressed to the Department of Revenue and the Board of County Commissioners for Walton County. And I believe...
Anybody have any questions? And these are the 2 letters that would ask about the different percentages and such.
That is correct.
TNT
and the cost, the county's cost allocation. Yes.
Okay.
I make a motion that we move forward with them.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Move forward.
And council, just for the indication, I will amend the December 1 letter to the Board of County Commissioners to reflect the proper chairperson being Sarah Commander now.
Okay.
And I will clarify there is a word there. It should be these, an R to an S on the last page. That I will correct.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Clayton. Mr. Atkinson.
I'm just showing one page here, which is not signed on the first letter. letter to Mr. Norman.
There should be a signature page to that. It may have just been a second page that didn't make your packet, but is likewise to be signed by the TDC chairperson.
All right, great. Thank you.
Didn't make the packet, okay.
And at some point, Madam Chair, I'd like Mr. Sunday to give us an update on the lifeguard situation that we've been discussing over the last several meetings. So at any point you think that's appropriate, I'd like to hear from him.
That's in my updates.
That's in your updates? Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, the next item is Taylor Engineering, Matt Trammell. And you're not Matt Trammell, but give us your name.
Duncan Greer, and unfortunately Matt couldn't be here. He got delayed in his Thanksgiving travels, but I'll go ahead and give you guys an update on the HSDR, the Hurricane Storm Damage Reduction Project easement acquisition, as well as an update on the proposed HSDR bar area vibra coring. So beginning with the easement acquisition, the county's attorney's office has provided that tabulations as recent as November 25th, which was last Wednesday, indicates that 513 property owners are not in favor of the easement, and 47 property owners have signed or granted the easement to the Army Corps of Engineers. So we're still at that kind of approximately 10% as a yes and a 90% as a no. It's kind of similar to our last update. It's our understanding that all of the easements have been sent out, and that the very end of January, the 30th or the 31st, 2016 is the last day to tabulate those or to count those. Moving on to the...
Can I ask how many have been, what percentage has been returned of the ones that have been sent out?
Approximately 50%. We're looking at, I think 560 have been tabulated as of last Wednesday. So...
about 1,000 that went out then?
Yeah, I think it was between... I believe it's between 1,100 and 1,300, but I'd have to confirm that with the county's attorney's office and AGS.
1,100 or something.
Yeah, I think 1,100 sounds correct. Yeah. So moving on to the proposed HSDR vibra coring, with the direction of the BCC, the county purchasing released the invitation to bid for 20-foot vibra cores to be conducted within the proposed bar area of the HSDR project. The ITB closes January 25th, 2016, and until then, or during the next, until January 4th, Taylor Engineering will be providing support services to answer any technical questions during the bidding process. So once the bids are returned, it's my understanding we'll present them to the BCC to obtain further direction. And that concludes the updates, and if you guys have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them if I can, and if not, I can get them to Matt and get an answer to you as soon as possible.
Anybody have any questions?
No.
Questions? Any questions? Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, what's next? The good stuff, he says.
Morning, Council. I'm Lauren Wilson with Center Communications. Here to give highlights for October and November. It's really been focused on getting the fiscal year off to a good start, promoting shoulder season heavily. So we'll start with some media. Co-op leads have been strong. We had a co-op placement in Southern Living with 8 partners, so that did very well. We also had our first sweeps in a few months, and that performed well. We've seen really, with the absence of sweeps, that we see lower website visitation, lower visitor guide requests. So even though this is a great benefit to co-op partners, it's also a great benefit to the TDC itself. So glad to have that back in the mix. For print placements, we were in these 3 publications in October and November. And we also have targeted cable running right now. This is based only on zip codes with high household income during appropriate lifestyle programming. We have an 8-week flight running October 19th through December 13th, delivering 5 million impressions. Some new paid media opportunities that we're doing some paid Pinterest promotions. Pinterest, we're seeing more and more, is a generator of click-throughs to the website out of any other social media. So we're doing culinary and event pins within Pinterest. And we also are doing signature event advertising on Spotify. We saw a lot of really great results for Pandora, so decided to go into Spotify. Spotify's results initially aren't as great as Pandora's, but it's still within industry averages. Another sort of fun thing that we did, on the Weather Channel app, we've done branded backgrounds. So in key markets, when you see sunny and clear or partly cloudy conditions, instead of, let's say, a background of Houston or Dallas, you'll see a South Walton background with the logo. So that weather.com has always been a really great performer for banners and engagement. So this is just taking that to the next level. We've also partnered with Travel Spike, which delivers emails to lists from Travel Channel, Condé Nast Traveler, TripAdvisor. These are luxury affluent travelers. Travel Spike was our #1 performer for desktop banners, so we decided to tap into them for paid email in this fiscal year. So we've been deploying sweeps emails to these lists. And added value to date, we're almost at $2 million. It's about half of our paid media spend. And if you can see the image on the right, that's a really nice article that Audubon magazine did on birding in South Walton. It's a very specific niche topic, but definitely in our high household income interest group. For digital co-op, if you remember from last spring, we have different levels of co-op that we're offering, either different levels of clicks. So based on click goal, we're delivering those. We had a late start to a couple of them, but we're definitely on pace to meet all of our goals. And for brand digital performance, we are exceeding industry averages. And interestingly enough, desktop performed better than mobile for the first time in a really long time. But we do have a lot of signature event banners running, and those seem to perform very well. For SEM, search engine marketing, we're still well below our industry, or well above our industry average and click-through goals for the year. And the last thing related to paid media, we've completed our reserve spending plan. This is for both the shoulder season reserves and the emerging market reserves. This is delivering both our traditional 30-second television spots and the longer form lifestyle videos to affluent people through online video. The reason for all of the different images up here is really to show it's just not on YouTube. We have YouTube, Facebook, we've added Instagram. It's also on Hulu, so live streaming TV. This is also the airport Wi-Fi takeovers in those Southwest hubs. A new thing we're doing is NCC Media, which is online streaming, but also if people are watching on-demand programming on their actual television, they're getting served South Walton ads on their television through that on-demand streaming. So moving on to creative and digital, we've completed the design and layout for the visitor guide. We saw a proof last week. The press check will be later this week or early next week, with a delivery in the county by end of the year. Coasters, we have completed another round of coasters that are distributed in market by the TDC team promoting upcoming events. We've completed some app updates, and these are live in both the Android and the Apple stores. We updated the logo, changed how the event section works. This actually links out to the website now because we were having some issues. And with the new website, we had to move servers. So that was a bit of work. And we're also doing the Chicago train takeover. If you remember, we did this last year. This is the interior takeover on the Brown Line, which is to affluent suburbs in Chicago. These are pictures of the creative from last year. We're making minimal updates to some of the imagery, but we're excited about the opportunity again. We also get added value, so in visitor centers throughout Illinois, there are sort of photo booth kiosks where you can take a picture and the image is put on a background of South Walton, and then it can be shared via social media and through email. And signature event banners, we completed the 38 Songwriters banner. This is actually outdated. We decided to take advantage of Jackson Browne as the headliner, so there's an image of him now in the ad instead of that guy. He's been in the ad for a few years now.
That guy.
I forget who he was. Social media and content planning, we've realized we never really talk about the articles that we write that go on the website. These are really the content that the TDC produces about the destination, and then these are longer form, almost blog post type length content. Then they're repurposed through social media. So in October, you'll see we had a lot about seasonality, and then in November, some interviews, insider tips, really try and give an insider perspective into what's going on in South Walton. So just wanted to point those out. Social growth remains strong. Instagram remains the sort of largest growth opportunity. You'll notice that YouTube had a decline. YouTube released a new product called YouTube Red in late October. It's a premium viewing, so there's no ads. And for some reason, unbeknownst to really anybody, it's lowered a lot of view rates. And this is across the board. This isn't with South Walton. There's a million chat rooms about people seeing lower performance metrics, and no one really knows why. But so we're down about 100,000 views total. But hopefully with that strange issue, then we'll get back on track. And this is just a recap for the past 12 or 13 months from October 14 to October 15. Page performance index. For October, we were a little lower than our average comp set. We had a great month in September. And are just continuing to monitor, but we're hanging right around the average. And that is all. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, Lauren, give us a word about Southern Living in February that we're going to be in.
Oh, the 50th anniversary. Yeah. So that is the 50th anniversary of Southern Living. There is a 16-page booklet insert, and it's the 50 things that that Southern Living loves about South Walton. So really the TDC team has worked very hard with Southern Living to get those 50 things right, have an equitable distribution across beach neighborhoods and in terms of topics. That it's a booklet that sits within the publication, which is going to be not your typical Southern Living. It's going to be, an issue that you keep, but the booklet tears out. It's about 5 by 7. It sits atop a full-page ad for South Walton, and then we have the interior cover. We have sort of an introduction. The back cover, we have a listing of events, interior back cover listing of events, and then the back cover, we have another small ad.
Great.
Will we be able to get copies of that?
Yes, we've ordered, I think, 1,000 or 10,000 extra. 10,000 extra.
Great.
So it was a good price. So we ordered those because they needed that order last week.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Downs.
Dr. Phil.
Good morning, everyone. Philip Downs, Senior Partner, Downs and St. Germain Research. We've done a lot of research over the last few months, and we're going to share 4 of those studies with you, and we'll be brief as we go through them. First is the economic impact. Now, we've shared economic impact information with you previously, and this particular study reworked some of that information and looks at the impact of visitors not only on the economy, but also on county government and the residents of the community. And I'll bring your attention to the last bullet point on that slide. There were times when one can interpret data differently. And in every case where that's true, we took a conservative approach. So what you're seeing in this report, and I believe that you have the entire report, and it's going to be published on the website, correct, John? So the results are data-driven. And when there's a chance to interpret data more than one way, we take the conservative approach in doing so. This is a number that you've seen before, 2.8 billion economic impact. And this figure represents what I was just talking about, that conservative approach. One could make a data-driven, serious argument that the total economic impact of visitors to this county is 4.2 billion. Now, we're presenting 2.8 billion. And the difference between those two numbers, number one, we use a conservative economic multiplier. We use M-Plan, which is one of the three most recognized economic modeling programs to estimate economic impact. Other communities use 1.65 or 1.89. Some use multipliers greater than 2. So we've taken a very conservative multiplier to derive that $2.8 billion. And we did not use $280 million that visitors pay in non-housing fees, fees for cleaning, fees for entertainment fees, other fees, damage fees that properties add on to the total housing bill. So if we were to add those $280 million in other fees that visitors pay for their housing and use a more aggressive multiplier, then the total economic impact would be $4.2 billion rather than the $2.8 billion that you see there. We looked at visitors' contribution to spending in Walton County, and the $1.9 billion comes directly from the 3,600 plus visitors that we interviewed. The local resident spending came from census data where we looked at the total population, we looked at their median income, and we estimated that they spent 95% of their total household income in Walton County. Now that's another place where we've been conservative. One could argue very strenuously that within any county in the U.S., the local residents spend far less than 95% of their total household income in that one county. We go on vacations, we send mortgage payments outside the county. So again, we took a very conservative approach. And in doing that, you see that visitors' spending of the total pie in Walton County is about 2/3. 65% of all the money that goes into this economy comes from visitors from outside the county.
Dr. Downs, let me clarify something with you, please. When you're saying visitor spending, you're talking about just South Walton. Is that correct?
Correct.
When you're talking about local resident spending, are you including North Walton or just South Walton?
All residents, all 63,000 roughly.
Okay, so in a sense, it's sort of apples and oranges. You're looking at visitor spending just from South Walton because that's the only place the bed tax is collected, but you're looking at all of Walton County when it comes to resident spending.
Correct.
Okay, all right, fine.
We looked at trends, and we were using information generated in previous studies done by the University of West Florida in 2000 and by the Strategic Planning Group in 2007. And you can see that visitation it doubled between 2000 and 2007 and doubled again from 2007 to 2015. And some of the property metrics you have seen before, so we'll skip on through those. One of the key things that visitors do in this county is create jobs. And you've seen the 19,600 job figure before. And again, this is a conservative estimate. We used a ratio of 165 visitors per job created. 165 per job created. Visit Florida uses a figure of 85 to 1. So if we were using Visit Florida's figure, which Governor Scott also uses, that figure of 19,600 would go up to about 38,000. So we're taking a very conservative view here. Once we add in the jobs created through induced and indirect effects, i.e. the multiplier effect of direct spending, then that number jumps up to 23,750. We also add in, as do economic analyses in other DMOs, the impact of construction-related activity that relates to visitors, and you can see the total job impact is 25,800. This slide is a little busier, but what we have done is look at all of the local and state revenues generated in Walton County by category. We have ad valorem taxes, the school tax, state sales and use, local option, right on down the line on the left side. Then we look at the amount attributed to visitors. And in this report, you see very detailed explanations of how we made those distributions. And I might add that, again, we were conservative in our calculations here. If you look at the 2000 University of West Florida study, if you look at the 2007 Strategic Planning Group studies, we made assumptions that were more conservative than were made in those two previous studies. And our bottom line is that 60.7% of all revenue, tax revenues, local and state, generated in Walton County are attributed to visitors. This next slide shows just within Walton County. This previous slide looked at all state and local revenues generated. The next slide looks at just Walton County government revenues, the money that stays here, everything from property taxes to the 1 cent local option sales tax to the bridge surcharge, all the way down the line, looking at county government entries and then attributing the appropriate percentage to visitors. And you can see here 69 of the 109 plus million generated within Walton County is attributed to visitors. And again, we made more conservative estimates and calculations than had been done in previous studies. This shows the expenses, the cost to Walton County government of servicing these visitors. And we used 2 approaches. This approach is called the traditional approach. This was the approach used in the Strategic Planning Group 2007 study and in the 2000 University of West Florida study, where certain percentages of categories like sheriff, support services, the TDC, planning and development, so on, were allocated to visitors. We used another approach for allocating cost to visitors that we call the use factor approach, where we look at the cost to Walton County government of serving a resident 1 day of the year, times 365 since residents live here. Then we looked at the cost of serving a visitor here for the same amount of time. And we looked at the total number of days that all of our visitors are here and the total number of days that all of our residents are here. And we came up with a ratio and allocated costs that way. And that particular approach, the use factor approach, is not in this slide, but it comes out with a figure very similar to this 45 million. So what we found through convergent validity is that the cost of servicing visitors to Walton County government is approximately $42 to $45 million. Now you go back to the previous slide, the revenue generated from visitors is 69 million. So we have 69 million generated from visitors, 45, almost 46 cost of servicing them. There's a $23 million surplus, if you will, to Walton County government in servicing visitors. And again, we took a very conservative approach here. We had the cost of 45 million. The SPG study in 2007 had 33 million. The University of West Florida study in 2000 had 3 million. So we've taken a much more liberal approach in assessing cost to visitors, which ends up having a conservative economic view of the impact of visitation. So a summary of the benefits and costs of visitors to Walton County, the 1.9 billion in direct spend, the 2.8 billion in economic impact, 65% of all of the economy in Walton County is due to visitors. 19,600 jobs generated from direct spending, 25,800 from the total economic impact. And the bottom line is that without visitors, Walton County government would be about the size of Holmes County or Jackson County or some of the other inland counties that don't have the benefit of visitors. So that's a lot of information very quickly. Any questions about what we've covered?
Dr. Nance, how do you account for, how do you calculate someone who has a second home here? He's not really a visitor. He may live in Tennessee, but has a second home here, spends 3 or 4 months here. I mean, how do you account for him in your statistics? Is that a visitor? Is that a guest? Or?
No, we did not count them as a visitor, Art. And that was another decision to keep with our conservative viewpoint here. If we had counted them, then the economic impact would have gone up even higher. Here are some comparisons of tourism's impact over 3 studies that I've referenced. I'll just hit a few of these stats. Direct spending, for example, in 2000 was $184 million. That has jumped to $1.94 billion in 2015. We look at the jobs created in 2000, we had 4,800. Now it's 19,600. Wages generated for people working in Walton County, 94 million in 2000, now that's 568 million. Room nights generated, looking at the bottom row here, 487,000 in 2000, that's up to 2.3 million in 2015. So you're seeing linear increases in spending, in visitation across the past decade and a half. So any questions on the economic impact? I mean, there is a ton of information in this, and it's detailed. It's going to be published. I know the challenge is going to be getting this information out. How do you get this information out to the appropriate target markets to document the impact, the economic impact of tourism to this county? Mm-hmm. We did a potential visitors study this year, follow-up to one we did in 2014. It was done by internet and telephone with 775 people in the top markets, the top origin markets. That's a very small slide to see, but basically what that question asked people is, if you were thinking about vacationing in the Southeast, what comes to mind? It's an unaided question. It's a difficult question to score highly on, and you can see that South Walton and or one of the 16 beach communities came out at 5% in 2015. That's an increase from 3% in 2014, and so we're moving in the right direction. We narrowed the frame of reference in this question. If you were just thinking about Florida as a beach destination, which specific destinations come to mind? And again, it was unaided. South Walton and the 16 beaches come up 9%. That's a 2 percentage point increase from 2014. Again, we're moving in the right direction. Then we did an aided recall question. Have you heard of South Walton? Have you heard of Rosemary Beach? And so on. And when we take the 16 beach communities together, along with South Walton, the aided awareness is 80%. That's up 1 percentage point from last year. That puts us in the neighborhood with areas like Panama City, Destin, Gulf Shores, and so forth. And you can see the individual beach communities and their aided awareness levels in that slide. Bottom line is we're moving in the right direction. It takes time to move awareness figures, and you see that we've made a 2 percentage point increase in unaided, a 1 percentage point increase in aided awareness. We've asked people, have you vacationed there? And about a third of them had, and those who had not basically didn't know much about us. So we have a continuing responsibility here to market, to increase our awareness. We did gap analyses on vacation attributes. You've seen these figures in our visitor tracking studies. Where you have red, we are underperforming in the minds of potential consumers. When you see black, we're overperforming, and marketing, the Zender Group and John will get together and assess that information. We still have problems with people knowing where we are. Only 1 out of 5 people know that we're between Destin and Panama City. And again, we're talking to potential visitors in 25 origin markets across pretty much the eastern U.S. People tend to think of us as Destin or Panama City, and we're so much more than that. And again, that's a marketing challenge. The perceptions that people come here, they get that right. Families, wealthier people. Any questions on the potential visitor study? I know I'm going pretty quickly here. It's been a long meeting.
That's good. Does anybody have any questions on any of this? I think we're good. Appreciate it.
So we had the visitor tracking study, and I'll just hit a couple summary slides at the end on this. But looking at 2014 visitors versus 2015 visitors, travel party size is up slightly. Something that's rather important is the median household income is up from 144 to 152.8. We're attracting the right kinds of visitors. Spending is up. It was 55.11 in 2014. Now it's 62.74. So those, not only are we attracting more, but we're attracting better visitors and they're spending more money. We have high percentages of probability of returning. That's terrific. We're starting to see a little more visitation from Texas. I know that the marketing is directed there. That's being successful. Any questions about the visitor tracking study? And then finally, we have some economic impacts of our events. Very briefly here, the Endless Summer Songwriter Series generated $1.6 million, generated 929 room nights. South Walton Fashion Week generated 459 room nights and 1.1 million. So as you make your decisions about funding certain events, you'll have this information. The Sing Red Wine Festival generated 863 room nights and had a $1.7 billion economic impact. Any questions?
Thank you.
Great stuff. Terrific.
Thank you.
Okay, Director's update, Pamela Watkins.
I will try to make this quick. Back in February, or I'm sorry, back in October, we had a familiarization tour. We had 9 meeting planners come to the area. We have a lengthy application that they fill out to be selected for this. And one of the top criteria is that they've never been here before. They've never held a meeting here before. Those meeting planners were from San Diego, Chicago, St. Louis, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, Minneapolis, Charleston, West Virginia, New Jersey, and Indianapolis. In addition to taking them to all the meeting facilities, we do fun things with them. As you can see from the bottom slide, we did stand-up paddleboarding. They were very proud of themselves. They had never done that before, and nobody fell off a board. So that was I think the highlight of their trip here. And the goal is for them to go back and be ambassadors for South Walton, to bring their meetings here. We've already had several RFPs generated from that, so that was very positive. Sandestin was the host property. As I speak today, Carly and Alicia are at Amelia Island at the Omni for Florida Encounter. This is the 35th year that Florida Encounter is in session. It is put on by Visit Florida. It is the only state that brings together CVBs and hoteliers throughout the state of Florida to meet with meeting planners from across the United States. So it's very productive. They have one-on-one appointments. We did host last night's opening reception. We do that every year. Sandestin was also a part of this. It gave them an opportunity to talk about their meeting facilities. We did show our video, and I would like to share that with you. I know I promised you that I would show that. It's 1 minute and 40 seconds. So if John, if you will cue that up.
She's not on the clock. Baggy's not here. stuff.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. So when we sponsor an event, that is one of our opportunities, is to show our meetings video, and it gives the planners geographically where we're located. It piques their interest to learn more about the area. In January, we'll be heading to AAA, a big show in Columbus. They have about 14,000 attendees, and we get a lot of AAA offices in the Ohio area calling us and wanting our visitor guides. Moving on to the Visitor Center, as you can see, in October we were up. November we were down, but overall we're up 6%. And there's no, I've said this before, there's no rhyme or reason on the number of people that come into the center, but we do average about 20,000 a year. Even on holidays, you might staff heavily thinking you're going to get a lot of people, but there's just no rhyme or reason. If you look at the merchandise, those numbers are kind of misleading. For October and November, it says we're up 158% October and up 78%. If you will recall, last year this time we were doing rebranding, a new logo, so we didn't have much merchandise to sell. So that's why those numbers look like that. But overall, we're up 28%. And people continue to go to TripAdvisor and give us reviews about the center. It's kind of small, you might not be able to read it. It says very helpful, especially if this is your first time to this area. This is a must stop. Everyone was so helpful with information, maps, coupons, and freebies. So we appreciate that when they take the time to go to TripAdvisor. Snowbirds are in town. They're coming into the center. The first snowbird meeting is December 9th. There's about 2,000 members of the South Walton Snowbird Club. We know there's more snowbirds than that, but that's how many the club tells us that they have. Last on the list is a recap of the annual meeting. I know a few of you were unable to attend. It was at the Lake House at Watercolor, and I think everybody loved that venue. It was beautiful. Mike Ragsdale was named Van S. Butler Junior Hospitality Award winner, and Melody Bogle, the new Artist of the Year. And as you can see, a picture of the attendees there, and altogether there was 204 attendees. So we had a great time. We missed those of you who couldn't attend. Any questions?
It was great. Your merchandise is really super. I mean, the new merchandise is just off the charts.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything?
Okay. Good job.
Thank you, Pam.
Great job.
Okay, Mr. Irvin.
Yes, a brief update on a couple of items here. And first, I was very fortunate to be included in a delegation from Florida to visit California and go to some of the most influential businesses on the planet, frankly. To get one-on-one attention from these businesses was really fascinating. Obviously, the state of Florida, as the #2 visited place in the world behind France, knows that digital and content is something that's vital, and they're actually trying to get a state that's been very successful to even move further towards the digital. So there were some great steps made. There were some great insights. Things like Facebook signing future agreements for virtual tour, virtual reality on phones. You've seen some of it. Maybe Google has worked on it. YouTube has just launched 360 reality, and for destinations like ours, it's something that you're going to see sooner than later. Airbnb was very plainly intent on taking over the world, and it looks by all accounts that they will. They will have probably by the end of this year more inventory than any other company in existence. It's that significant. When we were there, there was a great sensitivity to the issue of tax evasion, I guess, to be blunt, and lawyered up, and lobbyist groups were prepared to full-scale battle Airbnb. They last week signed a deal with the state of Florida, if you didn't see it, to remit to the Department of Revenue once a month all tax liabilities for any transaction in the state of Florida. So that is a bit of a game changer for every county. Walton County will now need to get their funds from DOR on such things, but that basically eliminates Airbnb's roadblock to growth in the state of Florida. We will be only the 5th location with Airbnb that they do that remittance. So it was interesting to hear some of that straight from them, and I think Visit Florida will continue to forge deeper relationships with these companies, and there's obvious reasons to do that. Out of home is something that we're working on. We talked to our marketing committee meeting last month, and it's in the budget. We are seeking local billboards to identify. Welcome to South Walton. Thank you for being in South Walton. However, availability is tough, and right now there really aren't premium boards available. So the question was asked, do we start by taking some of these alternate options? And really the marketing committee wanted to hold, and if we're going to do it, let's get good boards with peak traffic. And so at this time we have backup contracts on a few. One came available that is a peak traffic that we're going to chase. So we may be able to get one going. The truth is we don't think we'll be able to spend the money that we have budgeted this year because we just won't have the availability, but we are working on it. Ad equivalency.
Excuse me, John,
yes, sir.
The water tower at Sandestin, what's the status of that?
There is no status on any of the current utility areas where there's script, and so that's a conversation still to be had about that.
Am I correct? About 5 years ago, TDC paid a flat sum to have
4 or 5.
Yeah, and what was the length of that contract?
I'm only going to go from just general recollection. I think it might have been 10 years.
10 years, all right. So
but if we owe you some information on that, it would be a good thing to give you guys a snapshot of where we're at on that.
Basically, it's useless the way it is, so, okay.
Yes, sir. Ad equivalency, which you know is editorial coverage in traditional mediums, print. Blue was last year, green was this year, pretty solid. We're actually had Chicago Tribune. We delve into some of the numbers, and we're doing an audit because we don't think the reporting is as accurate as it could be. So you're seeing October only forecasted. We actually have next week U.S. News and World Report in town on assignment, and we'll be escorting them. And so that's a little bit different media outlet here, but it's interesting to see how the growth and the economic impact, which you just heard from Dr. Downs, is a little bit of a game changer. And so we're getting some different attentions, but we'll continue to keep a close eye on that. Further good news, we expect, fingers crossed, that in the very near future, Coastal Dune Lakes will be featured on Sunday morning. This is one of those aha moments for many people who have ever watched this show, that they end with how lucky we truly are. So for Coastal Dune Lakes to possibly be put next to, Snowstorm in Yosemite and Wild Horses in Nevada, it really is one of the best compliments that you can get. So we will advise you on an air date once we hear. They came and shot the film already, so we believe, without jinxing it too much, it's a done deal. Lead generation, in times when we mostly report big numbers and growth and positives, Lauren mentioned, you can see July, August, and September. Visually, very easy to tell that it is not to the levels that we would expect. And so we have spent a little extra time on sweeps and some of the promotion to keep the leads going. You can see that those are recovered nicely in October. Content marketing, that's obviously a huge piece. We just talked about all the digital powerhouses. Hashtags and promotions and loyalty perks have been brought back and probably given even more attention. And I think sometimes we talk about the business we're in a run in this county and the business we're in a run in tourism. We also need to just remember how important this place is to people. You can see here that we ask people to share their favorite things about the beach. My brother, 2 sisters, and I took my mother there for her 85th birthday. She's experiencing dementia and doesn't remember a lot. However, she does remember our trip there, and that was a year ago. Favorite memory ever. So that's how important this place is to people, and for us to be able to engage with those folks and for them to share their lives with us is pretty special. I want to make sure before I turn it over to Brian that we recognize Haley Horkman. She is now occupying one of our vacant chairs, so we're very thrilled to have her join the team yesterday. And we are doing interviews next week for our other current vacancy, so we have our fingers crossed that we'll be back up
And
to.
what is Haley going to be doing?
Haley is database administrator, so all the data that you see that generates on any of our outgoing platforms and visitor guide is her bailiwick. So. And then in front of you, you had a copy of the annual reports, which internally was produced by John Cross, and the team contributed all that information, as well as a copy of the Coastal Dune Lakes DVD that you recall us being fortunate enough to reproduce, and those will become available and start going delivery to all the bed tax collectors. They obviously reinforce how spoiled we are with our economy. There's beach safety messaging and calls to action to go to our website for more information about eco-exploring and such things. Any questions? Thank you. I think, you know, in the history of this organization, I'm not sure we've accomplished more, and to have a report that conveys that well, I'm very, very proud of the team and very proud of all of you and our community. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Kellenberger.
Good morning, Brian Kellenberger again with your beach operations updates. Destination improvement projects, Coastal Dune Lake signs. We're on our phase 3, which will be the last 6 of the signs that are on the multi-use path. We have identified the locations and working on theme and content. Melinda Gates with Environmental Department is spearheading this and is doing a fantastic job. Highly encourage all y'all to get out and look at the ones we have in place already. Multi-use path projects, Graton Beach to Western Lake. That is being done by Preble Rish. It was broken into 2 phases. Phase 1 is watercolor to west side of Western Lake. ITB has gone out. They expect to get that back in and then back before the County Commission for approval with construction to start sometime after the first of the year. Phase 2 is from the west side of Western Lake to Highway 283. The part of the AvCon parking project, parking areas were added to that project, so it got broken in 2 phases. We had a few challenges to get around. We're just about around them. Expect that to go out sometime later, early 2016 for construction after the summer season. Highway 98 to 38, 30A West Connector. That's the bike path going west from 30A towards Topsail. That was kind of on hold. We applied for some grants and an easement. We learned that the road was going to be reclassified, which would make it easier to build and less cost. So kind of put it on hold. Seagrove, some stormwater projects, Seagrove Beach to Highway 395. These are 2 stormwater projects, one on each side of 395 we're working on in conjunction with Public Works. Design is done. I'm meeting with Charlie Cotton on Wednesday to go over final design and schedule an intake meeting to get that out on the street for bidding for construction. We'll get that started and get it completed before the first of the year, summer season. Highway 38 parking project, 6 locations, 2 engineers. Part of it's included in the Western Lake multi-use path realignment. The other areas are being done by Tetra Tech. I recently received the conceptual plans. They'll go before the BCC on the 8th, and then we'll get final design, get that approved, get it out on the street for bid. Once again, our plan is to get those parking places in place before the summer season. Here are the, this is actually the first round of conceptual plans. There were a few modifications made to them on the ones I received yesterday. But it gives an idea of where the parking is going and what it's going to look like. And it's mainly situated around our regional beach accesses and a couple of neighborhood beach accesses. So if you get a chance to look at those. Graton Beach restroom beach access. We're still working with FDEP and in concert with Environmental on amending the land use plan and generating a concept design for the proposed restroom facility. Beach cleaning. These are year over year or month for year over year, 2014, 2015. As you can see, we're up a little bit in October and down a little bit in November. Code enforcement. Was kind of the reverse. This is citations and written warnings year over year. We were down a little bit and then up a little bit for the month of November. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, thanks, Brian, for
Okay.
That's,
Thank you.
Great job, thank you.
Everything looks, the cast, everything looks good. Any comments or any questions on that? Okay, Stan.
Okay, in your package, you'll see that we have archived the monthly reports for you. You can click on that Montala link, and it will take you to the August reports, or September, or the respective months that you're looking for. So just a quick click, and you can see all of those monthly reports listed there for you. Project updates, I think you've probably heard enough about strategic planning. The public space design process, that's underway. Their public meeting was held on November 17th, and then they met with some individuals. They've gone back, they're continuing to conduct phone interviews, and we're looking to schedule a public workshop for sometime in January, possibly February, where they'll come back and take some more public input. So that process is underway and ongoing. We had a little snag not too long ago, probably since your last meeting, with the public relations agreement, RFP. And what we ended up doing was abort that process, and we went with the second option to renew with Spring O'Brien. So that's been fully executed, so we have a public relations agreement in place there. The Beach Safety Services Agreement was approved by the BCC. That's your lifeguard contract, and that's been fully executed. So moving forward, I know there were some questions about that particular contract or agreement. The contract price increased from $765 to $887. But with that, we got an increase in the level of services. We captured that in the scope of services. We have one additional lifeguard to be placed at Grayton Beach, where the artificial reef has been deployed. We also have lengthened the season to now encompass more of spring break. So we have lifeguards on the beach now starting March 1st and going through September 30th. Also, we have one additional ATV, which provides for one more roving capability there. On personnel updates, the executive director.
Stan, excuse me, I think one other item that was in the agreement was the length of the agreement, 2 years, 3 years. Didn't you say that there was a change in the length of the agreement?
The length of the agreement is a 2-year agreement with one-year option to renew.
Good, thank you.
Personnel updates, the executive director vacancy has been advertised. It's been advertised for 3 weeks. It was advertised on November the 10th, and it will be open until December the 11th. It has been advertised on DMAI, FABMO, Florida City and County Management Association, League of Cities, Florida Association of Counties, as well as our own website. The Director of Administration, that one's posted, currently taking applications. It closes this Friday. And as John mentioned, the Community Relations Coordinator has closed, and we have interviews set up for that. When, John? 8th? 8th. So we'll have someone selected for that soon. And I guess that's all I have as far as updates. I would like to, on behalf of the staff at the TDC, I would like to recognize Commissioner Meadows and thank her for her service to the TDC. I've had the distinct honor over the last 3 years of working with her, not only on the BCC side, but also now as on the TDC side. So we appreciate her service and everything that she's put in.
Thank you. And I would like to say too, yeah, we're going to rotate this seat at my suggestion. I think I've served on here 3 years, and I've learned a lot, and I had some misconceptions when I first got on here, and I know how it works now, and I know a lot better the staff and how great everybody is, and what a wonderful job they do. I think the rotating the position will help the other commissioners to be involved and be engaged in all of the things that go on. So not going anywhere. I'll still be here right down the street. So and then I'll be able to talk to y'all, because it won't be a violation, conflict. Yeah. So I just thank everybody, and y'all are doing a great job. Just keep on doing what you're doing. And like I said, this will be my last meeting, and then Commissioner Jones has asked to be. Well, we kind of rotated it, and so she said that she would do it the next time. So she will be at the February meeting. So that being said, the new director, just some questions on the new director position. I think everybody's interested in, how's that going to be interviewed, selected, chosen? Is the bed tax community going to have any say in going through the applications, in the interview process, and the recommendation process?
My plan is to place that on the December 8th BCC agenda and ask for direction from the BCC on what kind of process they want to see moving forward.
Okay. Does anybody on the board have any comments about that? Anybody from the public? Let's take the board first.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is the best system, but last time, the process we went through, I believe each commissioner selected someone to be on the committee. We had five of us that were on the committee: Jeannie Daly and Teddy Stewart and Sally Merrifield, myself, and I forget the fifth gentleman. We went through the process of vetting all the candidates and making a recommendation to the BCC. We didn't pick a candidate, we just sort of gave them our recommendation as to which were the most qualified candidates. And I think a process like that, regardless of who is selected, a process like that it cuts down some of the difficulty of selecting the right kinds of people. So I would suggest that you recommend to the BCC a similar type process, something like having each of the commissioners designate someone that they wanted, and then those 5 people get together with the head of HR, and we went through the process of just vetting the candidates and then coming back with our list.
It is going to be a multi-step process. Having put it out as widely as we have and for as long as we have, we expect a good response. I currently have our HR department plugging them into a spreadsheet as they come in, and with different categories of direct DMO experience and indirect or related experience, if you will, education level, and some other factors that we'll use to kind of list and prioritize the candidates to help that vetting, if you will, of the process. And then once we figure out a process to vet it, get it down to a manageable number, then who's going to conduct the interviews and what's that going to look like?
One thing that I found very useful last time was there was an emphasis on coastal marketing experience, not just marketing experience. We had some good candidates from Colorado and so forth, but I think having coastal experience is really pretty important for us.
Resort destinations and such.
Yeah, it is, and I think maybe more than 5. I think a 7-member committee is better to get a diverse group in there. Right. I think 7's better, but does anybody else have any?
No, I think that's a great idea. I also think, defining what that committee is going to do in words of the experience. Do they conduct interviews or conversations with the candidates or anything like that?
No,
or is
we
it
didn't
just
do that.
Strictly by the resume?
No, what we had was we had the job description, and then we had the qualifications. We just tried to match them up, and then we force ranked them and said, okay, based on what you say you wanted, based on what this person has in the way of background, we think this person, and then we force ranked them.
But I think it'd be a good idea to have the committee interview the top whatever and
even if it's like because our past director was a good communicator. We want to make sure that even he identifies the weaknesses communicating to the community.
Right.
So,
Right,
and I think some of those things would be beneficial.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have, does anybody else have any comments?
No, I could absolutely agree with that. There should be some interview process with that, or with that panel, as part of the criteria for selection.
Mr. Miller, do you remember what number y'all vetted those down to?
I recall we had about 30 candidates, and we force ranked them all, really.
I think it was the top 10, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I can't remember whether it was 10 or 12, but yeah, I'd say 10 was what we came up with. These were the top 10 candidates. Unfortunately, a couple of those candidates fell out of the consideration before we ever got to interview them. But again, something like coastal experience was really something pretty high on our list.
And then I think it went down to, then I think it went from, it ended up about 7, and then I think the top 3 were picked, and then the top 3 interviewed extensively,
Mm-hmm.
and then the top 1 was selected. So it was a, it was a kind of a, does anybody else have in the audience wish to speak to this particular thing? Yes, Ms. Harris?
In the advertisement, did you take out the part that you had to be
Suzanne, Ms. Harris, come to the board.
Did you take out the part that you had to be familiar with Walton County?
I believe that's out there.
You believe, or it is out?
I have to look at it in front of me, but
Because if we did a really wide search and it says you have to be familiar with Walton County,
that wouldn't make a lot of sense.
that would not. And I'd asked that before at a BCC meeting, and I never got an answer. So I think that's really important, that you can have beach experience, that you have great communication with everybody, the citizens and that. But I think it's really important because, Cindy, you served on it last time because you were the BCC representative, and this time Cecilia will be. So I think it's really important that the commissioners appoint somebody, and that maybe y'all make a recommendation today that Stan can take to the BCC, saying we recommend 7 people, and that we do get this committee organized. And so I just don't want us to keep waiting on everything. So I think if Stan goes to the BCC and says that the board recommends that we have a committee of 7, then I think that would be a good recommendation for him to take, rather than just going to the board and asking them what their wishes are.
Art, you pretty much, that recommendation was almost like a motion, was it not?
All right, I'll make it a motion.
I'll second it.
What is your, what is
Well, I
the
think,
motion?
make a motion that we recommend to the BCC select 7 people to act as a screening committee for candidates for the TDC director position.
And to be an interview panel?
And to, and maybe not all 7, because, having 7 people interview a candidate is a little bit off-putting, but I would say some process to have some of the TDC involved in interviewing candidates would be useful. Let the BCC decide how they want to do that, but I think that the TDC ought to have some role in the process of screening the future director.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion or any questions? Anything? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. So the board's, TDC's recommendation is that a 7-member panel be selected and go through the review process. Yeah, you have to come up to the front though, and you have to identify yourself for the record.
Let me clarify something before Suzanne gets here. According to the motion we just made, the commissioners can select 7 people. That doesn't necessarily include any of us. That could be Correct. 7 other people. Do we also want to recommend that the TDC be involved in the process?
I think the 7-member panel needs to be made up of a TDC council member, a bed tax collector, a small bed tax collector, and a large bed tax collector.
How about 2 TDC members, 2 bed tax collectors, and then 3 other people of...
That's what I was coming for, to find out. Yep. If we were going to have any input, or we were just going to appoint. It made me very nervous to hear the commissioner that's going to take your place say the other night that tourism was no longer just south of the bay. Tourism was all of Walton County. And tourism, the money comes from south of the bay. Now, north of the bay, Paxton and Red Level and all those people may have tourism or Mossy Head. They may have a hotel and McDonald's at the truck stop. But the money comes from south of the bay. And we need to have the input. It needs to be filled up with people on, and it needs to be some of the large bed tax, some of the small ones, but we need to have bed tax collectors, and all the bed tax collectors are going to have to get more involved. So that's what.
Let me ask Mr. Atkinson. Can you have 2 TDC members on a panel without breaking any of the Sunshine Law? Or?
If the meeting was not publicly noticed or otherwise subject to Sunshine Law, it could present an issue because this matter may ultimately come to the TDC for recommendation. But frankly, based off the way you've described this committee functioning, it may very well appear to be a Sunshine Committee, as I just indicated to Mr. Sunday. Now, that will ultimately be depending on what the BCC tasked them with. But it appears that this is being tasked to be something broader than just fact-finding. It appears to be vetting, narrowing down the process. That will make it a recommending or advisory body, and as such, it's going to have to comply with Sunshine Law. So the fact that there are 2 TDC members on there, once it's noticed, you're okay. Because see, 2 BCC members could serve on, say, the Transportation Corridor Authority.
Right, okay,
As long as it's not that, as long as the meeting itself's noticed, we'll be okay.
And as I recall from last time, when the 5 of us got together to vet the candidates, that was a public meeting, and the public was invited to do it. We didn't do it in a back room someplace. We did it right out here, and there were people in the audience that overheard the conversation.
Okay, and then I had one other question of Stan. And now I've gotten off track here, but okay, maybe that's all.
So do you have a motion to TDC?
Yeah, let's revise the motion then. We'll make a recommendation that 2 members of the TDC, 2 members who are large bed tax collectors, or let's say bed tax collectors, not large, but 2 bed tax collectors, and then 3 other people selected by the BCC would make up the committee of 7.
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Like sign. Motion carries.
And just for clarification, as far as your recommendation goes, that 7-member panel is to perform exactly what?
The vetting of candidates, and
I
then
think we need to be more specific. I think we need to say more specifically. They will review the Excel sheets. They'll review the Excel sheets, narrow it down to 10, whatever the number is, and then narrow that down to 5, and then narrow that down to 3, and then the commissioners would interview the 3. That would be my recommendation. You've got to be specific, though.
Well, if we, let's say, narrow it down to 5, and then we narrow it down to 3, suppose the BCC selects people other than the 3 that we came up with. I mean, I think we can only go so far and say, okay, these are the final handful.
Well, that's the recommendation. I mean, they can, BCC can, they can veer off that path, but I think that the needs to be clear as to what the 7-member panel would be involved in, I think.
Well, specifically involved in sorting through the applicants and making a recommendation to the BCC. And then once a list of, let's say, a maximum of 10 candidates was recommended to the BCC, that the committee of 7 would be involved in reviewing or interviewing some of the candidates that the BCC decided they wanted to pursue. We might recommend 10 to the BCC and they knock out 3 or 4 of them. There's no sense us interviewing those people. But as we get down to the final handful, the committee of 7 ought to have a role in. I'm recommending the committee of 7 have a role in interviewing those candidates, those finalists. Final decision would have to be the BCC, of course.
perhaps the best way of putting it, rather than putting a number, because we don't know how many applicants we're going to have, would be to say that the committee's role would be to evaluate applications to determine if they have met the minimum qualifications, to rank the applicants, and provide the BCC with a recommended list of applicants to interview. And that way it allows the committee to select the appropriate number. If you get 12 people saying we're going to give you 10 interviews, kind of pointless. On the other hand, if you get 120, you may have to go through what Commissioner Meadows said, which was a winnowing process from 120 to here's your top 25 to here's 10. There may have to be more steps. I think simply asking you to determine minimum qualifications, which would eliminate anybody who did not meet those automatically, ranking those who are qualified, and providing a recommendation to the BCC of the candidates who should be interviewed by the BCC would be sufficient. Then that way the committee can determine. And I don't know that it makes sense if you liked 8 to say we have to give 10.
I think the committee has got to see some of these people face to face. I mean, I think they have to do some kind of an interview process with them, even if it's just come meet us and tell us, who you are.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that could be implicit in the ranking process. I think they could call back for interviews if necessary, and then ultimately select the candidates to be interviewed by the BCC, to basically task the committee with that authority.
Okay.
Lisa, do you have all that?
Okay, Ms. Harris,
whatever
do you
he
have anything
said.
else to add?
Last time y'all interviewed, only one person, and that was Sally Merrifield, got to sit in on the interviews from the whole committee. And she's not even south of the Bay, and she's not a bed tax collector. Now, Sally's a great girl, but she's not south of the Bay. So whoever is the representative, I think everybody on the committee ought to at least get to meet the people face to face and be able to ask some questions.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that it's a panel. You panel, you come before the panel. People who are interviewing are used to doing these kinds of things.
And I'll just note that the way that has been done, there are 2 ways to do it, just so everybody's clear. Obviously, the committee and the BCC will determine how it works, but one would be to have public interviews. The other would be, as the BCC has done numerous times before, schedule a day or time of interviews, put the committee members in different rooms, and allow the people to go on a rotating interview with each committee member to comply with sunshine of that issue. So it can be arranged either way, but the point is it can be set up where every committee member has a chance to face-to-face meet the people that they feel they need to meet with. There are lots of ways that can be handled, and those are just 2 of several.
Okay, you want to add ranking and listing the candidates?
I think there needs to be a motion as to what this committee of 7 would be responsible for doing, and I think suggested by the attorney would be ranking the applicants, recommending people to be interviewing them, or at least meeting them, and then sending those on to the commission to be interviewed.
And to start with, reviewing all of the applicants, not only ranking them, but reviewing the qualifications of all the applicants.
You'd have to review all of the applications and the spreadsheets that staff is completing. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Is that your motion?
Yes, exactly what you said.
Is there a second?
A second. Okay.
There you go.
Motion second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Like sign. Motion carries. Okay, thank you for that. I think we have one more thing here.
Right.
Is presentation by Candy Hansard.
Right. Let me. I'm going to have to do this because she had a family emergency this morning, and just very quickly I'll go through this. But this is it's a very important item, and I came across it a couple of weeks ago when Senator Gates was having a town hall meeting in Defuniak Springs, and this woman, Candy Hansard, gave a presentation to Senator Gates and to Representative Brad Drake about the lionfish problem. And I thought, well, what's the lionfish problem? And she gave a very impressive presentation, and afterwards we got talking about it, and I invited her to ask if she could come before us today, and she then submitted this information about the work she does, and this is a real dedication and passion with her. If you read the information that's in your booklets, and I'll just take 2 minutes and read you the letter that she wrote to me this morning since she couldn't be here, but forgive me for reading this, but it'll be shorter if I read it. Things I had planned to share with the TDC today were the lionfish invasion is a serious threat to the sustainability of our native fishery. Secondly, so far the largest concentrations of lionfish off our coast are in federal waters 100 feet deep and deeper. Building reefs in shallower waters is important to provide safe habitat for juvenile fish. Even one lionfish on a reef can cause a significant damage to biodiversity of that reef. A single lionfish could eat 65 of our native fish in a single feeding. So it is very important to keep your reefs clean of lionfish, to protect the native prey, and the fry of our native recreationality, never heard of that word, and commercially significant native fish species. Large lionfish have venomous spines that can cause tremendous pain even with the slightest touch. Protecting tourists from these stings is something the TDC ought to be concerned about. Educating the public to avoid lionfish would be wise. Encouraging local divers to remove lionfish from the reefs will become necessary in order to save those reefs. And the ECRA, which is her organization, the Emerald Coast Reef Association, provides free lionfish workshops to groups of 20 or more. If the TDC of Walton County or the Walton County Artificial Reef Association would like to schedule a free workshop, contact me. The best time for those classes would be in the spring, right before diving season kicks into high gear. She has provided me with letters that she has sent, or her organization has sent, to Senator Gates, Representative Gates, and to the governor. And I will be happy to provide those to Christina she can share them with all of us. But in reading this material, she presents a very strong case that this, if this epidemic, you might say, goes unchecked, it could have some serious ramifications for our waters in the future.
Yeah.
So I had never heard of it before, and I'm sure most of you hadn't heard of it either, but it's something that I think we ought to become more educated about.
It's also a very, and I'm sure Jim could attest to this, a very, very delicious fish. It goes good on the menu, phenomenal actually. And there's a lot of community-wide tournaments and contests to spear them, Hawaiian slings, all that stuff. So, but they are extremely invasive. And it does hurt when it gets stung. I can tell you that personally.
And I understand if you don't cook it properly too, it'll kill you.
Yeah, just like any other fish, you gotta cook it. But yeah, there's techniques to cut the spines and all that fun stuff. But it's
anyway. I'll get this letter to Senator Gates and to others, and some of you might want to write to your representatives as well. But it's something that we ought to keep an eye on.
Okay, thanks everybody. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded. Meeting is adjourned.
You need to get better gavel skills here.
Yes, you too. Like I said, I'm right down.
Her gavel skills are not what they should be. Yeah, we got to give you gavel lessons.
Well, you know, I'm so scared of being called infeld. Thanks.
Out of order, bailiff.
I mean, you know, it's scary. It's scary.
Bailiff.